Ethan Walker slammed his fist into the kitchen wall so hard the dishes rattled in the cabinet, and then he just stood there shaking, staring at the dent he'd made, because it was the 4th anniversary of the night he held his wife's hand while the machine stopped beeping. He wasn't supposed to feel this anymore. That's what everyone kept telling him. 4 years, Ethan. You have to move on. But nobody tells you what to do at 11 o'clock at night when the house goes quiet, and the silence is so loud it feels like it's trying to swallow you whole. And then somebody knocked on his door. If this story already has you feeling something in your chest, drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this one travels. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and come along for the ride. This one's going to stay with you. The dent in the drywall was about 3 inches wide. Ethan stared at it for a long moment, his knuckles aching, his breathing rough and uneven. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead. It had been flickering for 2 weeks, and he kept forgetting to change the bulb. There were dishes in the sink from dinner. Emily's drawing of a horse was taped to the refrigerator with a little pink heart sticker in the corner, because she always put a heart sticker on everything she made. "Daddy, do you like it?" "I love it, Bug. It's the best horse I've ever seen." "It's not a horse, Daddy. It's a unicorn." He'd laughed at that. A real laugh. And then she'd gone to bed, and he'd stood in the kitchen alone, and the laugh had dissolved into something else entirely, the way a lit match goes from flame to smoke in the space of a single breath. 4 years. 4 years since Rachel. He pressed his palm flat against the wall just below the dent and breathed. Outside, the rain was coming down hard. Seattle in November was its own particular kind of relentless, the kind of rain that doesn't bother being dramatic about it, just settles in and makes itself at home, and seems like it might never leave. He could hear it against the roof, against the windows, against the wood of the back porch where Rachel's old rocking chair still sat, because he couldn't bring himself to move it inside. And he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. He'd been standing in the kitchen since 9:30. He didn't know why he did this every year. Every November 14th, he put Emily to bed early, turned off the television, and just stood in the quiet, like he owed it to the night. Like if he sat still long enough, something would make sense that hadn't made sense in 4 years. It never did. He pulled his hand away from the wall and looked at his knuckles. They were red, not bleeding. He'd pulled the punch at the last second, which was the only sign left that some part of his brain was still operating on a rational frequency. He was 46 days away from turning 39. He felt like he was 60. He turned toward the sink to start on the dishes, because the dishes were something real and manageable and required no emotional bandwidth whatsoever, and that was exactly what he needed right now. Something to do with his hands that wasn't punching walls. That was when he heard it. 3 knocks. Not fast. Not frantic. Not the kind of knocking that announced an emergency, or a neighbor who'd locked themselves out, or a kid selling fundraiser chocolate bars. 3 slow, deliberate knocks with just enough pause between them that Ethan found himself counting them without meaning to. 1. He set down the dish he was holding. 2. He turned toward the front of the house. 3. And then silence. He stood there for a second, genuinely uncertain whether he'd imagined it. It was 11 o'clock at night. People didn't knock at 11 on a Wednesday in November. People were asleep at 11 on a Wednesday in November. People who were adults with jobs and responsibilities, and in Ethan's case, 8-year-old daughters who had school in the morning. He crossed the living room and pulled the front door open without checking the window first, which his old fire captain would have scolded him for. Always check, Walker. You don't know what's on the other side. He knew what his captain meant when he said that. He meant drunks and desperate people, and situations that could go sideways before you had time to think. What his captain definitely didn't mean was this: a woman standing in the rain without an umbrella. She was soaked through. Her dark hair was plastered to the sides of her face, and her jacket, a lightweight thing that was absolutely inadequate for this weather, had gone from whatever color it normally was to a uniform shade of wet gray. She wasn't shivering, which struck him as strange because it was 43 degrees, and she looked like she'd been standing outside long enough to be much colder than she appeared. She was holding something against her chest with both hands, a photograph. old by the look of it. The kind printed on thick paper stock, the way they used to do in the 80s and 90s, corners worn soft from handling. She looked at him, and Ethan Walker, who had carried people out of burning buildings, who had worked car accidents on the interstate at 2 a.m, who had sat across from a doctor in a hospital consultation room and listened to the word terminal applied to the woman he loved most in the world. Ethan Walker did not immediately know what to say. Because her eyes stopped him. Not because they were beautiful, though they were. Not because she was a stranger, though she was essentially that the new neighbor from 3 houses down who'd moved in 6 weeks ago, and with whom he'd exchanged exactly 4 brief conversations, all of them consisting primarily of hi and nice weather. And, yes, the recycling goes out on Thursdays. Her eyes stopped him because he recognized what was in them. The specific quality of a person who has been holding themselves together by sheer force of will for so long that the will is finally giving out. He knew that look. He saw it in his mirror every night. Claire. His voice came out steadier than he expected. What's going on? She opened her mouth, closed it. He watched her jaw tighten, watched her pull herself back from whatever edge she was standing on, through what was clearly significant effort. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice was low and a little rough. I know it's late. I know this is weird. I don't have a good explanation for why I'm standing on your porch at 11 o'clock at night. Okay. She stopped. Her fingers tightened around the photograph. I didn't want to be alone tonight. 5 words, simple as that. I didn't want to be alone tonight. Ethan had heard a lot of things in his 38 years. He'd heard his daughter say, I love you, Daddy, every night before bed. And he'd heard his wife say I do on a September afternoon 13 years ago, and he'd heard the words, we did everything we could in a hospital hallway. And he'd heard his daughter's first laugh and her first cry, and the particular sound she made in her sleep when she was having a good dream. He had never heard 5 words hit him quite the way those 5 did, because nobody said that. Nobody just said that. People made excuses. People had reasons. People came to your door with practical needs, a cup of sugar, a jump start, a phone charger, because having a practical need was acceptable and understandable, and didn't require you to look someone in the eye and admit that the empty space inside you had gotten too big to survive by yourself tonight. Claire Morgan was standing in the rain at 11 o'clock at night, and she was not pretending. Ethan stepped back from the doorway. Come inside, he said. He got her a towel first. That was the firefighter in him assess, stabilize, deal with immediate needs before the larger situation. She was wet and cold, and she needed a towel before she needed anything else. She took it without protest and ran it over her hair while he went to the kitchen and turned on the kettle, because tea was another thing you did before the larger situation. He heard her settle onto the couch behind him. He heard the specific silence of a person sitting very still and working hard at something internal. He put 2 mugs on the counter and found the tea Emily had picked out at the grocery store 2 weeks ago. The kind with honey and chamomile that she'd chosen because the box had a bee on it and she was going through a phase of intense interest in bees. He didn't ask Claire if chamomile was okay. He just made the tea. When he came back to the living room, she was sitting on the couch with the towel around her shoulders and the photograph on her knee. She was looking at it. Her expression was the careful, controlled look of someone who has made a decision not to cry and is currently in negotiation with themselves about whether that decision is going to hold. He set a mug on the table in front of her and sat in the armchair across from her. He didn't say anything. He'd learned from a decade in the fire service from the specific school of human experience that teaches you when to speak and when to shut up and let the quiet do the work, that sometimes the most useful thing you can do for a person is just be present. Just exist in the same room. Just be another heartbeat in the space. She picked up the mug, held it in both hands like she was warming them. Outside, the rain picked up. My brother died, she said. The words were flat. Not emotionless, the opposite of emotionless, actually loaded so heavily with feeling that they'd compressed themselves into something dense and expressionless, the way extreme cold can burn. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't say, I'm so sorry. immediately the way people do sometimes when they're more interested in filling the silence than in actually hearing what's been said. He just waited. 7 months ago, she said. March. He was 31. She turned the photograph on her knee, so it was facing slightly toward him, though not all the way. He could see enough to tell it was a picture of two people, a woman and a younger man somewhere outdoors, both of them laughing. His name was Daniel. Daniel, Ethan repeated. She nodded. He was... She exhaled slowly. He was the funniest person I've ever known. The kind of funny where you never knew if he was serious or not, and that was the whole point. He kept everyone off balance. In a good way. A small sound, not quite a laugh, but related to one. He called me every Sunday morning, exactly at 9, for 12 years. If he was going to be late, he'd text me first. Running 5C. That was it. Just that. Every time. She looked down at the mug. I haven't gotten a Sunday morning call in 7 months, she said. And I still wake up at 9 every Sunday and just sit there, waiting for my phone to ring. Like that's going to change. Ethan leaned forward slowly, elbows on his knees. What happened? He asked. His voice was quiet, not demanding, not prying, just present. Just asking because she might need to say it out loud. She was quiet for a moment. That's the thing, she said. That's the part I can't get past. She set the mug down carefully, looked at him for the first time directly holding eye contact with the steadiness of someone who has made herself do harder things than this. I'm a child psychologist. I have been for 8 years. I specialize in trauma and grief and emotional processing. I help families navigate the worst things that can happen to them, and I'm genuinely good at it. A pause. I know what the signs look like. I know every single warning signal there is. Ethan was very still. Daniel was struggling, she said. Had been for about a year. He told me some of it. Not all of it. I know that now. I know he wasn't telling me everything, but enough that I should have pushed harder. I should have asked different questions. I should have... Her voice snagged on something, and she stopped, and the expression that crossed her face was one he recognized deeply. The particular anguish of a person replaying a series of choices they cannot take back. Claire. I know, she said quickly. I know. I know the research. I know the statistics. I know all the things I would say to a client in my position. I know it wasn't my responsibility. And I know I did what I could with what I knew. And I know that people make their own decisions, and that the people who love them cannot always intercept those decisions no matter how much they want to. She pressed her lips together. I know all of it. But it doesn't help, Ethan said. She looked at him. No, she said softly. It doesn't help. Yeah. He sat back slightly. I know how that works. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite curiosity, more like recognition. Like she'd heard something in those words that made her understand she was talking to someone who wasn't just being polite. Your wife, she said. It wasn't a question. The neighborhood knew enough about Ethan's situation. 4 years was enough time for the story to become common knowledge among anyone who paid attention to such things. Rachel, he said. Yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you. The words came automatically the way they always did. He'd said them thousands of times since Rachel died. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for thinking of us. They were the right words. They just didn't carry much weight anymore from having been said so often. But then he said something he didn't usually say. It was ovarian cancer, he said. Diagnosed in January. She died in October, 9 months. He watched Claire absorb that. Emily was 4, he said. She turned 4 3 weeks before Rachel passed. Claire closed her eyes for a second, opened them. She doesn't really remember her, he said. Emily. She has pictures, and she has what I tell her, and she has. Rachel wrote her some letters before the end. For birthdays, and for when she graduates, and for her wedding day. He paused. But she doesn't have the actual memory. The person. The way she smelled, or the sound of her laugh, or... He stopped. His jaw worked briefly. She doesn't have that. And you have to carry it for both of you, Claire said. He looked at her. Yeah, he said. The word came out differently than usual, not tight or controlled, just honest. That's an enormous thing to carry, Claire said. So is knowing all the right answers, he said, and having none of them actually work on yourself. She was quiet for a moment. Yeah, she said, just like he had. They sat with that for a while. The rain kept going. The kitchen light was still flickering faintly down the hall. Ethan thought about changing the bulb, and then didn't move, because moving felt like it would break something in the room that he didn't want to break. Why tonight? He asked eventually. Specifically. She'd been looking at the photograph again. At the question, she turned it over in her hands so she couldn't see the front. Today would have been his birthday, she said. He would have been 32. Ethan nodded slowly. I've been in my house since I got home from work at 6, she said. And I've been, I don't know, spinning, just spinning. Going through the apartment, doing things that didn't need to be done, reorganizing my bookshelf, making a grocery list for food I probably won't buy, and just the walls kept getting smaller. She shook her head. I've never had claustrophobia in my life, and tonight my own apartment was making me feel like I couldn't breathe. What made you knock on my door? He asked. Specifically mine. She looked at him. A small pause. I was going to walk to the coffee shop on 5th, she said. They're open until midnight. I just wanted to be somewhere with people. And I was walking past your house and I saw your light on the kitchen light and I stopped and, I don't know, She exhaled. I've talked to you 4 times. I barely know you. I know you're a firefighter. I know you have a daughter named Emily. I know you take your recycling out on time and you have a garden that's done better than anyone else's on the block this year. He almost smiled at that. But there was something about knowing you were awake, she said. Knowing someone was in there. I don't know how to explain it. I wasn't going to knock. I stood there for probably 10 minutes telling myself it was a crazy idea and I should just go to the coffee shop. But you knocked, he said. I knocked, she said. He nodded. She looked at him with an expression that was somewhere between grateful and embarrassed, and something else he couldn't quite name. You didn't ask me what I needed, she said. You just let me in. You told me what you needed, he said. You needed to not be alone. That's not a complicated thing to provide. She seemed to turn that over. Most people would have found it complicated, she said. At 11 o'clock at night, a neighbor you've barely spoken to. Most people aren't awake at 11 o'clock at night on a day like this one, he said. She caught something in that. He saw it in her face. What day is today for you? She asked. Carefully, not pushing, just asking. He was quiet for a second. 4 years since I lost her, he said. November 14th. Claire's expression went through something he didn't quite track. Several things, actually, one after another. You were already, she started. Yeah, he said simply. Already having a bad night. You didn't interrupt a good one. She looked at him for a long moment. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. I wouldn't have knocked if I'd known. I'm glad you did, he said. The words surprised him slightly. But they were true, and he'd learned slowly, painfully, over 4 years of being a person who tried to mean the things he said because his daughter was watching him and learning how to be a person. From what she observed, he'd learned to say the true thing when he had it. He was glad she'd knocked. He didn't fully understand why yet. Around midnight, he heard Emily. He heard her the way parents hear their children, not with his ears exactly, but with some deeper sense that doesn't require sound, that registers the specific quality of her stillness, changing in her bedroom down the hall. He was on his feet before she called out, moving quietly, and he heard Claire shift on the couch and start to stand. Stay, he said. She might not be fully awake. He went down the hall and opened Emily's door. She was sitting up in bed with her hair everywhere and her eyes at half-mast. The particular look of a kid who is 8 years old and has woken up in the middle of the night and is trying to figure out if she's actually awake or still dreaming. "Daddy? I'm here, Bug. I heard voices." "That's right." He sat on the edge of her bed. "Our neighbor Claire stopped by. She's in the living room." Emily processed this with the gravity of someone doing complex calculations. "Why, she was having a hard night," he said. "She needed some company." Emily considered this. Then, "Like when I have a bad dream and I come sleep on your floor." Something tightened briefly in his chest. "Exactly like that," he said. She nodded, apparently satisfied with this comparison. Then, "Is she okay?" "She's going to be." "Can I say hi?" "It's Midnight Bug. I'm already awake." He looked at her. The dark eyes that were Rachel's eyes. The stubborn set of her jaw that was absolutely definitively Rachel's jaw, and he recognized a losing battle. "2 minutes," he said. Emily got out of bed in the slightly uncoordinated way of children who are more asleep than awake, and Ethan steered her gently down the hall toward the living room. Claire stood when they came in, surprise, and something soft crossing her face when she saw the small figure in the oversized pajamas. "This is Emily," Ethan said. "Emily, this is Claire. She lives 3 houses down." Emily looked at Claire with the unfiltered directness that 8-year-olds have, which adults spend years learning to hide. "Were you crying?" Emily asked. "Emily," Ethan started. "It's okay." Claire crouched down so she was at eye level. "I was a little bit, yeah." "Why?" "It's my brother's birthday today," Claire said. "And he's not here anymore, so I was feeling sad about that." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took Claire's hand in both of hers, the way she did sometimes when she was being serious about something. "My mom's not here anymore either," Emily said. "But my dad says she's still with us. Just different." Claire's composure shifted, slightly. She held it, but just barely. "That's a really beautiful thing to believe," Claire said. "It's not a belief," Emily said with the absolute certainty of an 8-year-old who has made up her mind. "It's true." Then she let go of Claire's hand, announced, "Good night," and turned and walked back down the hall to her room. Ethan stood there for a second watching the hallway where his daughter had just been. He heard Claire exhale slowly behind him. He turned around. Her eyes were bright with something she was clearly not going to let turn into tears. Her jaw was tight. She was holding herself together with both hands, again figuratively speaking. "She's something," Claire said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "She is." He crossed the room and sat back down. Claire lowered herself back to the couch, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and the rain was still going, and the kitchen light was still flickering, and outside down the block, somewhere, a car alarm was going off briefly, and then stopping, and none of it mattered particularly. "She looks like her," Claire said quietly. Ethan stilled. "Your wife," Claire said. "I've seen the photos, the ones you have in the window. She has her eyes." He breathed. "Yeah," he said. "She does." At 1 in the morning, he got up and changed the kitchen light bulb. He didn't know exactly why that was the moment he chose to do it. Maybe because something in the room had settled enough that practical things seemed possible again. He did it quickly, standing on the step stool he kept in the pantry, and when the new bulb came on steadily without flickering, the kitchen looked different, brighter, more itself. He came back to the living room. Claire was still on the couch, but she was sitting differently now, less braced. The tight quality in her shoulders had eased. She had her feet pulled up under her the way you sit when you've stopped calculating whether you should stay, and the photograph was face up on the couch cushion beside her Daniel's birthday face, looking up at the ceiling. "Better?" she asked, nodding toward the kitchen. "Much," he said. "I kept meaning to do it." "Grief delays the minor tasks," she said. Not unkindly, not clinically, just as a fact she'd observed and was naming out loud. "Is that a medical finding?" "It's a human finding," she said. "The big grief takes up so much bandwidth that everything else sort of cues." She looked at him. How long had the bulb been out? About 2 weeks. Right. She tilted her head slightly. What else has been queuing? He thought about it. My neighbor's fence, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Not your fence, he clarified. The one on the other side of me. Tom Kaczynski. His back fence lost 2 boards in that windstorm 2 weeks ago. He's 74, and he mentioned it to me, and I said I'd look at it, and I haven't gotten over there yet. That's not grief, she said. That's just being busy. Is it, or is it the same thing wearing different clothes? She looked at him for a moment. That, she said, is an extremely precise observation for 1 in the morning. I used to think a lot at 1 in the morning, he said. I've had a lot of practice. She turned the photograph over again, face down this time, like she'd decided something. Do you ever feel like... She started, and then stopped. What? Like the grief has become so familiar that you don't know who you'd be without it. He was quiet for a moment. Every day, he said. She nodded slowly. I've been a psychologist for 8 years, she said. I've helped people through complicated grief, through traumatic loss, through things that would break most people. And I've been good at it because I understood the theory, and I had good instincts, and I genuinely cared about my clients. She paused. And then Daniel died, and everything I know went exactly nowhere. Because you can't therapize yourself, Ethan said. You can't, she agreed. You can try. You can apply all the frameworks and do all the exercises and say all the right things to yourself in the mirror, and it's like... She searched for the image. Like trying to do surgery on your own hand. You have the knowledge, you have the tools, but the angle is impossible. What do you do then? She looked at him. I'm working on that, she said. The honesty of it landed heavily. I moved here partly because of that, she said. I needed to leave the place where everything happened. The apartment where I got the call. The hospital where I... She stopped. The coffee shop where we used to go on Sunday mornings before the 9 o'clock call. I couldn't keep every corner had a Daniel in it. Every corner had a before Daniel was gone in it. So you left? So I left. She looked around his living room, at the slightly dented wall he'd been hoping she hadn't noticed at Emily's school drawing of a horse unicorn on the refrigerator, visible through the kitchen doorway, at the rocking chair, visible through the window on the back porch. I've spent 6 weeks trying to build a life that doesn't feel like it's made of someone else's wreckage. Is it working? Ask me in another 6 weeks. He nodded. Outside, the rain had slowed. It hadn't stopped. This was November in Seattle. It was not going to stop, but it had thinned to something quieter, a sound like static instead of a sound like pressure. I should probably go, Claire said, but she didn't move. You don't have to, Ethan said. A beat. I mean, he said. I know what you mean, she said. And I appreciate it. She picked up the photograph, held it for a second. Then she looked at it. Really looked at it in the way she had perhaps been avoiding doing all night. He was so good, she said softly. He was genuinely good. The kind of good that doesn't get enough recognition because it's not flashy. It was just him showing up, remembering things, making people feel seen. She traced the edge of the photograph lightly. He would have loved that Emily told me her mom is still with us, just different. What would he have said? She smiled. A real one, the first real one Ethan had seen from her, and it changed her face completely. He would have said, "See, Claire, even the kids know more than you." She let out a sound that was almost a laugh. He was always saying I overthought things, which was fair. I do overthink things. Comes with the territory, Ethan said. Caring about people tends to make you overthink. She looked at him for a moment with an expression that was evaluating something, though he couldn't tell what. You're easier to talk to than I expected, she said. Low bar, he asked. No, she said. High bar. I talk to people for a living, and I know how few people actually know how to listen. He shrugged. I had a good teacher, he said. My captain at the station. 20 years in the fire service, seen everything twice. He used to say the most important thing you can do when someone's house is burning down is not say anything, just stand next to them while it burns so they're not standing alone. Claire was quiet for a second. That's either the saddest or the most profound thing I've heard in weeks, she said. Probably both, Ethan said. She set the photograph down carefully, face up. Daniel laughing at the sky. Thank you, she said, for letting me in, for not making it weird. It's not weird, he said. Lonely people deserve somewhere to be on bad nights. She looked at him. Is that what we are? She asked. Not challenging. Genuinely asking. Lonely. He thought about it. I think so, he said. I think we've both gotten pretty good at not calling it that. But yeah, I think that's what's going on. She nodded slowly. I've been telling myself I just need more time, she said. That the loneliness is a symptom of grief, and when the grief... She stopped. I know better than that, actually. I know loneliness is its own thing, its own hunger. Yeah, I'm going to go, she said. And this time, she meant it. She stood, picked up her jacket from where it had dried over the arm of the couch. Picked up the photograph. Tucked it carefully into her pocket. Ethan stood too. It stopped raining, she said, glancing toward the window. Almost, he said. Give it 20 minutes. She looked at him, something quiet in her expression. Thank you, Ethan. Any time, he said. She nodded. And then at the door she stopped and turned back. Hey, she said. Yeah. You said you had a good night lined up in the kitchen before I knocked. He waited. I'm glad you answered the door, she said. He held that for a second. Me too, he said. She walked out into the damp Seattle night, the almost stopped rain misting around the streetlights, and Ethan stood in his open doorway and watched her until she reached her own porch and her own door and went inside. Then he closed his door. He stood in the hallway for a moment, and the house was quiet, but it wasn't the same quiet it had been at 11 o'clock. It was a different quiet, not empty. Not the silence that felt like it was trying to swallow something. Just quiet. He went to the kitchen. The new bulb glowed steadily. He washed the dishes. He thought about 3 slow knocks in the rain. He thought about, I didn't want to be alone tonight. He thought about Emily's hand in Claire's hands, the absolute certainty of 8 years old, saying it's true, not just a belief. And for the first time in a long time on the night of November 14th, Ethan Walker did not stand in the kitchen with his fist against the wall. He just washed the dishes. And let the quiet be quiet. The next morning, Ethan woke up at 5:15, the way he always did. No alarm. No gradual surfacing. Just eyes open and mind already running. He lay there for a moment staring at the ceiling, and the first thing he thought about was not Rachel, which was unusual for a November 15th. He thought about 3 slow knocks in the rain. He got up, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window, the way he did every morning, while the neighborhood was still dark and the rest of the world hadn't started yet. The rain had stopped overnight. The street was wet and reflective, the streetlights doubling in the puddles on the pavement, and 3 houses down Claire Morgan's apartment was dark. He thought about what she'd said when she left. I'm glad you answered the door. He thought about the way she'd said it, not grateful exactly, or not only grateful. Something more specific than that. Like she'd been carrying something for a long time and had set it down briefly in his living room and was remarking on what that felt like. He understood that feeling. He poured his coffee and went to sit at the kitchen table, and he did something he hadn't done in years. He pulled out the small wooden box from the bottom drawer of the cabinet beside the refrigerator, the one that held Rachel's letters, the ones she'd written in those last months. The sealed ones addressed to Emily he didn't touch. Those weren't his to open. But there were 2 others. One she'd written him early on when she'd first gotten her diagnosis, that he'd read so many times the fold lines were nearly splitting. And one other. A second letter he'd found tucked into the back of the box about 6 months after she died in her handwriting with only his name on the front. He hadn't opened the second one. 4 years. He hadn't opened it. He picked it up, turned it over. The envelope had gone soft from being handled. He'd picked it up and put it back down probably 30 or 40 times over 4 years, but the seal was still intact. Rachel's handwriting on the front, his name. Ethan, just that. He held it for a while. Then he put it back in the box, closed the drawer. He wasn't ready yet. He didn't fully know why Claire Morgan, sitting in his living room until 2 in the morning on the 4th anniversary of Rachel's death, had made him reach for the letter, and he wasn't going to figure it out at 5:30 in the morning. He drank his coffee and heard Emily starting to move down the hall, and put the box completely out of his mind. Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway in her unicorn pajamas, hair a complete disaster. One sock on and one sock off, for reasons Ethan had long since stopped trying to understand. "Is Claire still here?" she asked. "She went home last night," he said. "Sit down. I'll make you eggs." Emily climbed onto her chair and propped her chin on her hands. "Is she sad?" "She's going through a hard time. Because of her brother." "That's right." Emily was quiet while he got the pan out. Then, "Can I bring her something, like when Mrs. Patterson was sad and we brought her those cookies?" Ethan looked at her over his shoulder. "What would you want to bring her?" he asked. Emily thought about it with the serious focus she applied to most problems. Not cookies, she decided. She seems like a muffin person. "A muffin person," he repeated. "Some people are cookie people, and some people are muffin people," Emily said with the confidence of someone stating established scientific fact. "She's a muffin person. Can we make blueberry ones?" Ethan turned back to the eggs. "After school," he said. Emily smiled the specific smile she had when she'd gotten what she wanted without having to argue for it. It was Rachel's smile. He'd told her that once early on, and she'd gone quiet in the way she did when she was storing something important, and he hadn't brought it up again, waiting for her to do with it whatever she needed to do. He cracked the eggs and didn't think about the unopened letter in the bottom drawer. He thought about it the whole rest of the morning. The shift that day was a regular one. 9 hours. No major calls. A kitchen fire on Mercer that was out in 11 minutes, a medical assist on Capitol Hill that was more paperwork than emergency. His crew was his crew, which meant they were comfortable enough with each other that the silences were easy, and nobody asked him how he was doing in that weighted November 14th way that people had tried in previous years. His partner Dennis caught up with him during the afternoon downtime, dropping into the chair across from him in the break room with a coffee mug and the particular expression of a man who has something to say and is deciding how to say it. "You look different today," Dennis said. "I look exactly the same as every other day," Ethan said. "Nope." Dennis drank his coffee. "You look like something happened." "Nothing happened. Your neighbor's something happened. The new one, 3 houses down." Ethan looked at him. "Tom Kaczynski told Marcus, who told Johnson, who told me," Dennis said entirely without apology. "Small Street Ethan, you had a light on at midnight. She was on your porch." "She needed company," Ethan said. "She had a hard night." Dennis was quiet for a second. "Okay," he said. "That's it," Ethan said. "That's the whole story. She knocked, I let her in. She went home at 2. I didn't say anything," Dennis said. "Your face said something." Dennis put his hands up, the gesture of a man withdrawing from a conversation he hadn't technically entered. But then he said quietly, "You doing okay with yesterday being what it was?" Ethan considered the question. "Yeah," he said. Which was true, which was strange because it hadn't been true on a November 15th since the first one 4 years ago. "Actually, yeah," Dennis nodded. "Good." He left it there, which was one of the many reasons Ethan had been glad to work alongside him for 6 years. On his lunch break, Ethan found himself looking up child psychologists in Seattle. Not for any particular reason, he told himself, just curiosity. He wanted to know what that world looked like, what it meant to spend your days doing what Claire had described, carrying other people's worst moments professionally, building a practice out of the ability to sit with pain and make it navigable. The search results were full of clinic websites and professional directories. He didn't look for her specifically. That would have been strange. But he thought about what she'd said. You can't do surgery on your own hand. You have the knowledge, you have the tools, but the angle is impossible. He thought about the angle. He thought about spending 4 years getting very good at taking care of everyone except himself. He closed the browser. He went back to work. Emily was at the kitchen table doing homework when he got home at 6, and she looked up when he walked in with the expression she always had when she'd been waiting to tell him something. "I looked up blueberry muffin recipes at school," she said. "At school." During free reading. You used free reading time to research muffin recipes. Mrs. Henderson said we could read anything we wanted, Emily said reasonably. Recipe websites are reading. He was not going to win this. He put down his bag. "Show me what you found." She had in fact done real research. She'd written down 3 recipes in her best handwriting, one from a website, one from what she described as a grandma website, which he interpreted to mean some kind of home cooking forum, and one she'd apparently gotten from asking her school librarian directly. "Mrs. Chen makes blueberry muffins for the book fair every year," Emily explained. "She said the secret is you have to use buttermilk. Mrs. Chen told you her secret muffin recipe." "I asked nicely," Emily said, "and I told her it was for a neighbor who was sad. She said that was a good reason." Ethan looked at his daughter. At Rachel's eyes looking back at him with that particular mixture of practicality and warmth, that he'd spent 8 years trying to understand whether it was nature or nurture or some impossible combination of both. "Okay," he said. "Mrs. Chen's recipe." They made muffins. It was not a simple process. Emily took it extremely seriously, which meant measuring everything twice and consulting the handwritten recipe after every step, and at one point having a brief crisis when they discovered they didn't have quite enough buttermilk, which was resolved by Ethan running to the corner store while Emily stood guard over the mixing bowl, as though it might do something unexpected without supervision. They turned out well. Better than well. They came out of the oven golden and domed the way good muffins are supposed to, and Emily did a small victory movement that she would have denied was a dance if anyone had described it as one. "Can we bring them tonight?" she asked. "It's 7:30, he said. "That's not that late." "On a school night it is." Emily's expression was the one she deployed when she was preparing to wait him out. She was patient about waiting him out. She'd gotten that from Rachel, too. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Before school. We wrap them up tonight, and you can bring them over tomorrow morning." She considered this. "Can I pick the wrapping?" Sure. She disappeared to find appropriate wrapping materials, which in Emily's world meant going through 3 drawers and a craft box, and emerging 15 minutes later with a piece of checkered cloth and a piece of ribbon that he was fairly certain had come off a Christmas present 2 years ago. She wrapped the muffins with a concentration that he found privately deeply moving, and when she was done, she set the bundle on the counter and looked at it with the satisfaction of work done correctly. "Perfect," she said. Ethan looked at the muffins wrapped in checkered cloth with a red ribbon on his kitchen counter on a weeknight when he should have been thinking about bedtime routines and tomorrow's lunches and the permission slip for Emily's field trip that needed to go back to school by Friday. "Yeah," he said. "Perfect." 2 days passed. They saw Claire briefly across the street when she was getting her mail from the window when she left for work in the morning. The muffins had gone over the following morning, delivered by Emily with the gravity of a diplomat presenting a treaty, and Claire had accepted them with an expression Ethan caught the edges of from the porch, not just pleased, but something more, genuinely moved. She'd crouched down to Emily's level and said something he couldn't hear, and Emily had nodded very seriously, and then turned and ran back up the path. "What did she say?" Ethan asked. "She said they were the most thoughtful thing anyone had done for her in a long time," Emily said. "And she said she had a feeling I was going to be very good at taking care of people when I grow up." Ethan held that. "Are you?" he asked. Emily thought about it. "Maybe," she said. "Or a marine biologist. I'm still deciding." But the muffins had opened something. Small, nothing dramatic, just a channel that hadn't existed before. Claire texted him the next morning she'd gotten his number from the building directory. She explained which was either resourceful or slightly forward, and he wasn't sure which to say. The muffins were excellent, and that she'd already eaten 3 of them, which was unprofessional behavior, but justified under the circumstances. He wrote back Emily would be glad to hear that. She used a school librarian's secret recipe. She sent back a laughing emoji, and then, of course she did, and that was that for 2 days. Small exchanges. Nothing waited. Until Saturday. Ethan was in his backyard attempting to winterize the garden, which was a task Rachel had always handled, and which he had been failing at in various ways for 4 years when he heard the sound of something falling on the other side of his fence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Then a word that was definitely not appropriate for a child to hear spoken quietly, but with feeling. He stood up. "Claire?" A pause. "Yeah." Her voice came from the other side of the fence from Tom Kaczynski's yard. "I'm okay. I was trying to—" Another pause, the kind that contains the sound of someone rearranging themselves. "Tom asked me to look at his fence while he's at his daughter's this weekend. I thought I could just look at it, but then I started trying to fix it, and—" The 2 boards that came off in the windstorm. A longer pause. "How did you know about the boards?" "Because I told him I'd fix it 2 weeks ago, and I haven't gotten over there yet," Ethan said. Silence from the other side of the fence. "So I just stole your errand," she said. "You tried to steal my errand. Do you have tools?" "I have a hammer and some optimism." "Come around to the front," he said. "I have what we need." It took them most of the afternoon. Not because it was complicated. It wasn't. It was 2 fence boards and some hardware, but because they kept talking. That was the thing Ethan noticed as the afternoon moved from 1 o'clock to 2 to 3:30, as the boards went up and the sun moved behind the houses to the west, and the temperature dropped a few degrees, and their breath started showing faintly in the air. They kept talking. Not about heavy things. Not at first. He talked about the garden, what he'd been growing this year, what had worked and what hadn't. The particular disaster of the tomatoes in July, which he described in enough detail that Claire started laughing partway through and didn't fully stop for several minutes. She talked about her apartment. She'd been unpacking slowly, she said, in the way you unpack when you're not sure you're staying 1 box at a time, always leaving a few more, so it couldn't quite feel permanent. "Are you staying?" he asked. She held a board flat against the fence post while he drove in the nail. "I think so," she said. "I think Seattle might be the right place for me. She paused while he worked. "I'm still figuring out what I want it to look like. What did your life look like before?" She thought about it. "Efficient," she said. "Busy. I worked a lot. I was good at the work and the work was meaningful, and that was enough to fill most of the space. I had friends, but I didn't. I didn't let people in the way you're supposed to." A pause. "Daniel used to tell me I was the most emotionally intelligent person he knew, who was also the most emotionally inaccessible." "He wasn't wrong," Ethan said. She looked at him. "Based on what?" she asked. "Based on the fact that you stood outside my door in the rain for 10 minutes before you knocked," he said. "On a night when anyone else would have just knocked." She considered that. "Fair," she said. "He sounds like he knew you well," Ethan said. "Better than anyone," she said quietly. "Better than I knew myself sometimes." She handed him the next nail from the coffee can they'd brought over. "What about you? What did your life look like before? Before Rachel died, or before she died?" He thought about how to answer that in a way that was true. "Full," he said. "It was full. I went to work and came home, and she was there, and Emily was there, and the house was— it had a sound to it. That's the best way I can describe it. Houses have sounds, right? The way people move through them, the noise they make without meaning to. Rachel had this habit of humming to herself when she was cooking. Not songs exactly, just sound. And I didn't notice it until she was gone, how much of the house's sound was her." Claire was quiet. "I notice the silence in my apartment," she said. "Same thing. I keep thinking I hear—" She stopped. Daniel used to call at 9 on Sundays, and I told you that already. But I didn't tell you about the texts. He texted me stupid things all week. Memes and news articles and random facts. Did you know there are 37 million ants for every human on Earth, Claire? 37 million. Just like that out of nowhere. All caps. And I would roll my eyes and send back some reply, and that was it. That was just the noise of having him in my life. She looked at her hands. I still look at my phone when it's quiet, she said. Still waiting for something stupid about ants. Ethan drove in the last nail. He stepped back, looked at the fence. Both boards solid. Done. You know what's strange, he said. What? I haven't talked about Rachel this much in 4 years, he said. Not in actual conversation. Emily knows what I tell her. The guys at the station know the surface of it. But talking about what she was actually like... He shook his head slightly. I stopped doing that after the first year, because I thought if I talked about her I was... He paused. I don't know. Keeping her dead, making it real over and over. And now... He thought about it. Feels different, he said. Talking about how her house sounded. That doesn't make her more gone. It makes her more present. Claire looked at him steadily. Yeah, she said softly. That's exactly it. That's the difference between grief as an ending and grief as a... She stopped herself. Sorry, professional brain. No, say it. Grief as a continuing relationship, she said. The research on this is... She caught herself again. The idea is that people don't stop having relationships with the people they've lost. The relationship changes. It becomes one-sided in a practical sense. But psychologically, emotionally, we continue. We talk to them in our heads. We hear what they would say about things. We imagine how they'd react. That's not pathological. That's just love with a different shape. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Emily says Rachel is still with us, he said. Just different. I know, Claire said. She told me. What did you think when she said it? I thought... Claire said carefully that an 8-year-old had just explained something in 3 words that most adults need years of therapy to get to. He almost smiled. Don't tell her that. Her ego doesn't need the help. Claire laughed. A real one, not the complicated almost laugh from the rainy night. A real laugh that surprised her slightly, like she'd forgotten she was capable of it. It was a good sound. He noted that, and then immediately didn't note it, which was its own kind of information. They carried the tools back to his yard. Claire helped him roll the hose in because he'd been watering the garden before the fence project derailed him, and they worked in an easy rhythm that should have been strange given that they barely knew each other and wasn't strange at all. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Yeah. Why do you do it? She handed him the end of the hose. Stay here, this neighborhood, this house. You could have gone anywhere after she died. Why stay in the place with all of it? He thought about it. Really thought, not the automatic answer he gave sometimes, which was something about Emily's school and stability. Because the house is where she was, he said. And I couldn't take that from Emily. Emily doesn't have the memory of her, not the way I do. But she has the house. She has the room where she was born. She has Rachel spent a whole Saturday painting Emily's room. That blue on the wall that Emily picked out. I'll never repaint it. He paused. And I couldn't take that away from her even if I wanted to. Even if I could. Claire was quiet for a moment. You're a good father, she said. Not effusively, just as a direct statement. He didn't know what to do with it, so he didn't try. What made you go into child psychology? He asked. Specifically, children. She was quiet for a moment, and he sensed the answer was not a simple one. Daniel, she said finally. He had a hard time as a kid. Not terrible, nothing dramatic, just the normal hard time of being a sensitive kid in a world that doesn't have a lot of patience for sensitive kids. He used to come home from school and just be wrecked by the regular cruelties of other children. And I was older, and I didn't always know what to do, but I learned that just sitting with him helped. Just being there and not trying to fix it helped. And I thought there should be more people who know how to do that. There should be people whose actual job it is. So you became one. So I became one. Ethan looked at her. At this woman who had moved 3 houses down, who had stood in his rain-soaked doorway with a photograph and a broke-open expression, who had crouched down to look his daughter in the eyes, and who had, as of this Saturday afternoon, fixed a neighbor's fence without being asked because she'd said she would, and she followed through on what she said. He'd be proud of you, Ethan said. She looked away for a second. I hope so, she said. Her voice was controlled, but only just. I spend a lot of time... She stopped, started again. I spend a lot of time hoping that. He would be, Ethan said. No qualifications, no hedging. She looked back at him. You sound very sure of that. I know enough about him to be sure, Ethan said. A kid who texted his sister all caps and facts just to make her day louder. That's a person who thought about the people he loved. That's a person who would be paying attention to what you're doing now. She pressed her lips together. The jaw tightening he'd seen before. The held together. I'm gonna go make dinner, she said, before I start being embarrassing. You're not being embarrassing. Give me 2 more minutes and I will be, she said, and it was half a joke and completely honest. He nodded. Hey. He stopped her at the gate. Thank you. For the fence. Tom would have been waiting on me for another 2 weeks. She looked back. You would have gotten there. Probably, but now you got there first. Something passed through her expression that he didn't entirely catch, like a thought she was deciding not to voice. Good night, Ethan, she said. Good night, Claire. He watched her go, the same thing he'd done from his doorway 4 days ago, and this time he noticed that he was watching, which was new. He went inside. He cooked dinner. He helped Emily with her spelling words. He signed the field trip permission slip. He did the dishes and turned off the kitchen light, the new bulb burning steady and clear. And he went down the hall to check on Emily, who was asleep, with her arm thrown over the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was a year old. He stood in her doorway. You're raising her well, he said quietly, to nothing, to everything, to the particular quality of a sleeping child's room. She went and made muffins for a sad neighbor, using a school librarian's secret recipe. She figured all that out herself. He stood there for another moment. I think I'm okay, he said. He wasn't sure who he was talking to, but the house felt like it heard him. He went to his room, and the week after that was when things started to change. Not in a large or dramatic way, not in a way anyone would have been able to point to and say, there, that's the moment, but in the small way that real things change incrementally, almost invisibly, until one day you look up and realize the distance between where you started and where you are is wider than you thought. Claire began leaving coffee outside his door on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Those were the days he had early shifts. Left the house by 5:45, and she'd figured this out somehow, and on the 3rd consecutive Tuesday, he found a takeout cup of dark roast on his porch at 5:30 in the morning. He stood there looking at it in the cold dark for a long moment before he picked it up. He texted her. You don't have to do this. She wrote back 4 minutes later, which meant she was already awake. I know. I'm a morning person. The coffee maker is already running anyway. Stop being weird about it. He stared at his phone. Then he wrote, Thank you. She sent back, Don't thank me. Just drink it while it's hot. He drank it on the drive to the station. It was good coffee. Better than the station coffee, which was not a high bar. He thought about asking how she made it, what beans she used, and then felt foolish for thinking about it, and then thought about it a little more anyway. On the Thursday of the same week, he repaired her rocking chair. He hadn't planned to. He'd gone over to check on something with the fence. One of the boards had shifted slightly. He wanted to make sure it was holding, and she'd let him in the back way through her yard, and he'd seen the chair on her porch. Older than Rachel's, similar in style, one of the back spindles cracked clean through. That needs fixing, he said. I know. My mother's chair. I've been meaning to take it somewhere. I can do it, he said. She'd looked at him. "Ethan, you just fixed my neighbor's fence." "Different job," he said. "This is maybe an hour's work if I have the right wood. Do you want me to fix it or not?" She'd been quiet for a second. "Yeah," she said. "I'd really like that, actually." He came back Saturday morning with a piece of ash wood he'd cut to match from a scrap in his garage. Emily came with him because Emily had decided she was interested in woodworking now, and Ethan had no objection to this whatsoever. Claire made tea and sat with Emily on the porch steps while Ethan worked, and he could hear them talking. Emily explaining with great enthusiasm and some technical inaccuracy how wood joinery worked, and he didn't look up, but he was aware of the voices, the sound of it, the way the morning had a texture to it that it hadn't had an hour before. When he finished, he tested the chair. "Sit in it," he said to Claire. She sat, rocked. The chair was solid. The repair was invisible if you didn't know where to look. Her face did something quiet and complicated. "My mom used to sit in this chair and read every morning," she said. "Every single morning. She'd have her coffee and her book, and she'd be there when I came downstairs, and it was the most reliable thing in my life for 20 years. She paused. "She's been gone 6 years. Ethan was quiet. "Thank you," she said, "for this, genuinely." Emily, who had been watching this exchange with the close attention she applied to important things, said, "Did your mom have the same color eyes as you?" Claire looked at her. "No," she said. "My mom had brown eyes. Mine are from my dad's side." "But she's still with you," Emily said. "Just different." Claire pressed her hand briefly over her mouth. Ethan looked at his daughter. Emily shrugged as if this were all obvious, as if she were slightly bemused by the amount of adult difficulty being applied to information she'd had figured out for years. "Can we have tea now?" she asked. Claire laughed, and it was the full version, the one from the fence afternoon, and she pressed her hand harder for a second before she lowered it and stood up. "Yeah," she said. "We absolutely can." They had tea on the porch. Emily drank hers with a quantity of honey that was medically concerning, and she told Claire about the field trip coming up, which was to a marine biology center, because Emily was in her marine biologist phase, and Claire asked questions with the focused interest of someone who was genuinely listening, not performing listening. Emily noticed. Emily always noticed. And Ethan sat with his tea in the cool morning air and thought that the house, his house 3 doors down from this porch, the house with the humming kitchen and the blue bedroom wall and the rocking chair on the back porch that he hadn't moved, that house had started to feel a little less like a monument. Wasn't sure how he felt about that. Wasn't sure whether to be relieved or guilty about the relief. It was the first week of December when it happened. When the thing happened that shifted everything. Ethan had driven to the pharmacy to pick up Emily's prescription. Nothing serious, just a refill, and on the way home he'd taken the long way, the route that went past the water, because it was a clear evening, and you could see the Olympics across the Sound in that particular winter light that only happened when everything aligned correctly. He'd stopped for a red light and his phone had buzzed on the seat beside him, and he'd glanced at it, not reading it, just registering the name. Claire. Then the light changed and he drove, and when he got home and got Emily settled with dinner, he picked up the phone and read the text. "Found something tonight. In one of the last boxes I hadn't unpacked. Don't know what to do with it. Can I come over?" He stared at the message. Of course he wrote back. She was there in 10 minutes. She was still in her work clothes blazer, and all which meant she'd come directly from whatever she'd been doing when she found whatever she'd found. She was holding something. A small envelope, cream-colored, slightly yellowed. She came in. She sat down. Emily was in her room. They were alone. "I need to show you something," Claire said. "And I need you to know before I do that I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know Ethan. I want to say that before you see it." He looked at her. She turned the envelope over. He saw the name written on the front. The handwriting. The name. Ethan. His full name. Written in Rachel's handwriting. The world went very still. "Where did you get that?" His voice came out completely level, the tone he used in emergencies, the one that was a decision rather than a feeling. "Claire, where did you get that?" She looked at him, and her eyes were frightened in a way he hadn't seen from her before. "Let me explain," she said. "Please, just let me explain everything." Ethan did not move. He sat with his eyes on the envelope on his own name in Rachel's handwriting, and the room felt like it had changed pressure somehow, like something had shifted in the air itself. Claire was watching him with the careful stillness of someone who understands they are in the presence of a moment that requires them to stop taking up space. He reached out slowly. She placed the envelope in his hand. It was lighter than he expected, which was irrational because he knew paper weight didn't correspond to emotional weight, and yet his hand registered something about the lightness that felt wrong, like it should be heavier for what it was carrying. "Where did you get this?" he said again. Not a question this time, a sentence. "I need you to let me explain from the beginning," Claire said. "The whole beginning, not just the envelope." He looked up at her. Her expression was not guilty exactly. It was something more complicated, the face of a person who has been carrying something they didn't ask to carry, and has been carrying it alone, and is now setting it down in front of someone, and doesn't know what's going to happen next. "Tell me," he said. She took a breath. 3 years before I moved here," she said, "I was doing a volunteer rotation at Seattle General, a grief support program they were running for terminal patients and their families. I was a year out of my residency. It was a Saturday program, 2 hours in the afternoon, and I'd been doing it for about 4 months. She paused. "One of the families I worked with, not in an official capacity, more just in the hallway in the way those things happen when you're in a hospital and people need to talk, one of the family members was a woman named Rachel Walker. The name from her mouth, his name, his wife's name." Ethan's hand tightened slightly on the envelope. "She wasn't one of my patients," Claire said quickly. "She wasn't enrolled in the program. She was there visiting, and we ended up talking in the family lounge, because the family lounge on that floor was where people went when they needed to be somewhere that wasn't a hospital room, but also wasn't the outside world yet." She looked at her hands. "We talked for about an hour that first time. She was remarkable, Ethan. I need you to know that. In that particular way that people sometimes are when they're facing something enormous. Clear and funny and completely herself," Ethan breathed. "We talked 3 more times after that," Claire said. "Over about 6 weeks, just in that lounge. She knew I was a psychologist, so some of what she told me was she was processing things, thinking out loud. But a lot of it was just her talking about her life. About you. About Emily." She stopped. "She talked about Emily constantly." Ethan pressed his lips together and did not speak. "One afternoon she came in and she was different," Claire said. "Not worse physically, I couldn't tell that from looking at her. But something had shifted in how she was sitting and the way she talked. Like she'd made a decision. And she said to me—" Claire stopped. Closed her eyes briefly, the expression of someone finding an exact thing in memory. She said, "I've been writing letters. For Ethan and Emily and the people I love. Because I want to say things I'm not going to be able to say in person. And I have one that I need someone to hold on to for me. Because if I leave it at the house, I'm not sure Ethan will find it at the right time. And if I give it to our friends, they're going to be too broken themselves to remember." Claire looked at him. She said she needed someone outside the circle, someone who could hold it and know when to give it. Ethan said nothing. "She gave it to me," Claire said. "She asked me to hold it for her and find the right moment to give it to you, and I said yes. Because she asked me with the kind of asking that you don't say no to." She exhaled, and then 6 weeks later she was gone. Outside somewhere on the street, a car door closed. Emily made a sound in her bedroom, a brief rustling, the normal sound of a child shifting in their bed. The house went quiet again. "You didn't deliver it," Ethan said. "I didn't deliver it," Claire said. "Because Ethan, I was 29 years old and I had known this woman for 6 weeks, and I had a letter in my hands addressed to her husband, and I didn't know you. I had no connection to your life. I tried to figure out the right way to reach out, and every way I thought of felt wrong, felt invasive, Felt like showing up at a grieving man's door and saying, "Hi, I met your wife in a hospital, and she gave me a letter for you." She shook her head slightly. I kept telling myself I would find the right time and the right way. And then time passed, and I moved. And it went into a box with things I couldn't deal with, and that box went to the back of a storage unit for 3 years and... She stopped. "And then you moved here," Ethan said. "And then I moved here," she said. 3 years later. I wasn't looking for you. I didn't even know what neighborhood I was moving into, not specifically. I found the apartment on a listing, and it was the right size and the right price, and I took it, and I moved in." A pause. "And the second week I saw your name on the mailbox at the end of the walk." Ethan looked at her. "Ethan Walker," she said. "I stood in front of your mailbox for 5 minutes. I thought I told myself it could be a different Ethan Walker. It's not an unusual name. I'd lived here 3 weeks before I confirmed it was you. I asked Tom Kaczynski." She almost made a sound. "Couldn't think of a subtle way, so I just asked him. He told me you were the firefighter whose wife had passed, Emily's father." "And you still didn't tell me," he said. "No," she said. "And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds terrible. But I hadn't unpacked that box yet, and I'd been living next door to you for a month, and we'd had 4 conversations, and every time I thought about knocking on your door and saying, 'I have something that belonged to Rachel,' She stopped. "I was a coward," she said. "I am not proud of it. I've been carrying this for 3 years, and I was afraid of what it would mean to put it down." He was quiet for a long moment. In his hand, the envelope. Cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. His name in Rachel's handwriting, the particular slant she gave to the E in Ethan, the way she always made the T slightly taller than it needed to be. "She knew you'd need it at the right time," Claire said quietly. "She said that. She said, he'll need it when he's ready, not when I'm gone." She looked at him. "I don't know if this is the right time. I don't know how you're going to feel about any of this in 10 minutes. But I couldn't. I found the box tonight and the envelope was right on top and I couldn't put it back." Ethan turned the envelope over in his hands. "The night you knocked on my door," he said slowly. "Yes. You already knew who I was." "Yes." "And you came over anyway." "Yes." Her voice was careful, controlled. "And I want you to know that the reason I came over had nothing to do with the letter. I'd been thinking about the letter since I found the box in storage, which was before I moved here, but the night I knocked, that was about Daniel. That was about me and his birthday, and not being able to breathe in my own apartment. It had nothing to do with—" "But you knew," he said. "I knew," she said. He set the envelope on the cushion beside him. He stood up. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to her for a moment, and he put both hands on the sill and breathed. She did not rush him. She sat on his couch and let him have whatever he needed to do. He turned around. "Tell me what she was like," he said. "That day she gave you the letter. Tell me exactly what she was like." Claire looked at him, read his face, understood what he was asking and why. "She was wearing a blue sweater," Claire said. "The kind with a wide neck, a little oversized. Her hair was shorter than it looks in the photos you have in the window. She'd lost some from treatment." She paused. She was laughing when she came in. Someone in the hallway had said something funny, and she was still laughing about it. And that was the first thing she did before she sat down, finished the laugh. Like she'd decided she was going to finish it before the harder thing started. Something crossed Ethan's face. "She did that," he said. "She'd finish whatever she was doing before she'd let anything else in. She called it closing the tab." "That's exactly what it looked like," Claire said softly. "Closing the tab." A pause. "She asked about you first, before she talked about anything else. She asked me how I thought people who were left behind managed the guilt. And I told her what I knew, the clinical version, and then she was quiet for a second, and she said, 'Ethan is going to try to be fine. He is going to try so hard to be fine that he'll forget to actually be fine.'" Ethan's jaw worked. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, she knew me. She said you'd throw yourself into Emily. She said she was grateful for that, and terrified by it at the same time. Grateful because Emily needed it, terrified because it meant I wouldn't take care of myself, he said. Because it meant you'd use Emily as a reason not to, Claire said. Not a criticism. She understood why. She just wanted you to know she saw it. He sat back down, not across the room, closer. He sat in the chair nearest the couch and he picked up the envelope again and held it. She sounds like she loved you enormously, Claire said. She did, he said. I know that. His voice was rough. She did. It was not a thing I ever doubted for a second. That's not nothing, Claire said. That's actually very rare. He looked at her. How long has it been since you opened something that was hers? Claire asked. Not clinically, just asking. I opened her first letter about 6 months after she died, he said. The one she wrote when she was first diagnosed. I've probably read it 100 times. He turned the envelope over. There's a second one I found about 6 months after that. I've never opened it. Claire stilled. What does the front say? Just my name. A beat. Ethan, she said carefully. Is it possible? It's possible, he said. He looked at the envelope in his hand and the envelope he'd put back in the drawer at 5:30 that morning, and his brain was doing the math without his permission. 2 letters, both just his name on the front. One found early. One found later, tucked away, hidden almost. He stood up again. He went to the kitchen. He opened the bottom drawer. He took out the wooden box and opened it, and took out the second envelope, the one he'd been picking up and putting back down for 4 years, and he came back to the living room and held it next to Claire's envelope. Same handwriting. Same cream-colored paper. The same slightly taller T in his name. Different envelopes. 2 letters. She wrote you to, Claire said, the understanding settling over her face. She wrote me to, Ethan said. He sat down. He put both envelopes on the cushion beside him. He looked at them. Which one first? Claire asked. I don't know. His voice was very quiet. I don't know which one is which. Claire reached out slowly and touched the edge of the envelope she'd brought. She gave this one to me specifically because she wanted it to reach you at a different time, she said. So if I had to guess, she stopped. This one might be the second one. The one she wanted you to have later. He thought about that. He picked up the one from the drawer. The one he'd been too afraid to open for 4 years. His hands were not shaking. He'd carried people out of burning buildings, and his hands had not shaken then, and they were not shaking now, but something in his chest was doing something he didn't have a word for, a kind of trembling that had no external expression. He opened the envelope. The letter was 2 pages. Rachel's handwriting, small and precise, the way she wrote when she was saying something important, taking her time with each letter. He read. Claire sat perfectly still. He read the whole thing without stopping. He didn't make a sound. His face moved through things she could see and things she couldn't. And when he reached the end of the second page, he just sat there, holding it, not lowering it, not putting it down. Ethan? Claire's voice was very soft. He lowered the letter. His eyes were wet. He was not crying, not technically, but his eyes had the quality of a person who has reached the edge of the question of whether they are going to cry or not, and is still working it out. She said, he started, stopped, tried again. She said she was afraid I'd make her memory into a wall instead of a window. He exhaled slowly. She said she'd been thinking about what it would mean if I never let anyone in again. She said she didn't want her love for me to become a cage. Claire did not speak. She said, if someone kind comes into your life, Ethan, don't confuse loyalty to me with loneliness. Those are different things. Loyalty is what we had. Loneliness is what happens if you let fear make all your decisions after I'm gone. His voice broke on the last word, just barely a crack in something that had been solid for 4 years. She knew me so well. She knew exactly what I'd do. She loved you enough to plan for it, Claire said. He looked at her. She planned for it, he said. 4 years ago, She sat in a hospital with a notebook, and she thought through what my life would look like after she was gone, and she wrote me a letter about how to live in it." He shook his head. "Who does that?" "Someone who was thinking about you more than herself," Claire said quietly. "Even then." He looked down at the letter. His thumb moved over the last line at the bottom of the second page. He read it once more silently, his lips barely moving. Then he looked up at Claire. She said, He started, and his voice was different now. Not broken, something else. Opened, maybe. She said, "The person who comes into your life after me isn't a replacement. They're proof that I taught you how to love well." Claire's composure cracked. Not all the way. But the careful control she'd maintained for the entire conversation shifted, and her eyes went bright and full, and she pressed her hand to her mouth the way she had on the porch when Emily said her mother was still with them, just different. "She sounds," Claire said carefully, her voice unsteady, "like she was absolutely extraordinary." "She was," Ethan said. He set the letter down. He picked up the second envelope, the one Claire had brought, and he looked at it for a moment. "Can I read this one alone?" he asked. "Of course," Claire said immediately. She stood up. "Don't go," he said. "Not yet. Just give me a few minutes." She sat back down. He went to the kitchen. He sat at the table under the new bulb that burned steady and clear. He opened the second envelope. This letter was shorter. 1 page. The handwriting was slightly less precise. She'd written it at a different time. He could tell maybe when she was more tired the letter's a little less careful. But it was unmistakably Rachel. He read it once fast. Then he sat very still. Then he read it again. She hadn't known Claire's name. Of course she hadn't. She'd simply written the woman who holds this letter, but she'd written to him about her. She'd written about the woman in the lounge at the hospital who listened to her, who asked good questions, who had the particular quality Rachel wrote of knowing what it means to carry something and not complaining about the weight. Rachel had written, "Whoever she is, she's someone who understands what it costs to show up for people. And I want you to know from me that that kind of person is worth knowing." She held my words carefully when I gave them to her. People who can hold words carefully are rare, Ethan. You know that better than anyone. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then he got up and went back to the living room. Claire looked up when he came in. He sat down across from her. He held the second letter in his hand, and he looked at her, and he said, "She wrote about you." Claire's face went still. "She didn't know your name," he said, "but she described you. She wrote about the woman in the lounge who held her words carefully." He paused. "She said people who can hold words carefully are rare." Claire said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Ethan, I am so sorry I waited 3 years." "Don't," he said. "I need to." "You brought it," he said. "You brought it when you found it, and you could have put it back in the box and I would never have known. You didn't. You brought it." He looked at her. "That's what matters." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't entirely read. Gratitude, yes. Grief still. Something else. "How do you feel?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. "Like the last 4 years just got explained to me," he said. "Like I've been reading a book and I just got to the chapter that made everything before it makes sense." "What do you mean?" "I mean she planned this," he said. "I don't know if she planned it, or if it just happened the way things happen sometimes when someone loves you enough to think clearly even when you can't. But she left 2 letters. She gave you one. She knew you were out there. She knew." He stopped, shook his head slightly. "She knew I wasn't going to be fine by myself forever, and she made arrangements." Claire was quiet. "That sounds," she started. "Like her," he said. "It sounds exactly like her. She made arrangements for everything. She wrote Emily's birthday letters for the next 10 years before she died. She organized the house so I'd be able to find everything. She called my sister twice and told her what to watch for with Emily in the first 6 months." He looked at the letters on the cushion beside him. "She made arrangements." "She made arrangements," Claire repeated softly. "She trusted you with something that mattered to her most," he said. She didn't trust people easily. She chose carefully. She held back until she was sure. He looked at Claire. She was sure of you, in 6 weeks. Something moved across Claire's face. She asked me about Daniel, Claire said suddenly. Ethan looked at her. That last day, Claire said. She asked me about my family. I mentioned I had a younger brother, and she asked his name, and she asked what he was like, and I told her about the Sunday calls and the all-caps texts, and she laughed. Claire's voice went slightly rough. She actually laughed. She said he sounded like someone who knew how to love out loud, and she said she hoped he had someone in his life who appreciated it. Ethan watched her. He did, Claire said quietly. He had me, and I didn't. She stopped. I didn't appreciate it enough when I had it. I appreciated it, but not I didn't think about it. I just had it. And you don't think about the things you just have. Until you don't have them, Ethan said. Until you don't have them. They sat with that. It was after 10. Emily had been quiet in her room for 2 hours, and Ethan knew she was genuinely asleep, not just in the early light sleep of a child waiting to be checked on. He should go look. In a minute. I want to ask you something, he said, and I want you to be honest with me. Claire looked at him. Okay. When you knocked on my door that night, he said, was any part of it about the letter? She held his gaze. No, she said. The letter wasn't even in my head that night. That night was about Daniel and the dark, and my apartment getting smaller. That's the truth. He nodded. But when I saw your light on, she said, I did think I thought that's the man Rachel talked about. Even in that moment. I thought he's awake. He's alone too. She paused. And I think part of what made me knock instead of going to the coffee shop was knowing that whatever else I didn't know about you, I knew Rachel had loved you. And I trusted her judgment. He breathed out slowly. You knocked on my door because Rachel trusted you enough to give you a letter, he said, and you trusted her enough to knock. When you say it like that, she said, is it wrong? She thought about it. Really thought. No, she said. I think that's actually what happened. He looked at the letters on the cushion. At the cream-colored envelopes, the slightly yellowed paper, his name in the handwriting he had loved for 13 years. He thought about Rachel in a hospital lounge in a blue oversized sweater, finishing a laugh before the harder things started, because that was how she moved through the world. Close the tab, finish the laugh, then deal with what comes next. He thought about arrangements. She put you next door, he said. It wasn't quite a statement. Wasn't quite a question. Ethan. I know, he said. I know it was an apartment listing and a price point, and I know coincidences exist. I'm not saying I'm not making it mystical. I'm just saying that of everything that could have happened with those letters, of all the ways this could have gone, this is how it went. Claire looked at him for a long moment. And how did it go? She asked. He picked up both letters, held them together, his dead wife's words in both hands. You knocked on my door because you were in pain, he said, and I let you in because I recognized it. And we've been... He searched for the word. Circling around each other for 5 weeks, fixing fences, making muffins, drinking coffee in the morning. He paused, and none of it has felt wrong. No, she said quietly. It hasn't. And now you're sitting on my couch at 10 o'clock at night, he said, and you've given me something that my wife wanted me to have, and she wrote. He stopped because his voice was doing something he needed to get control of. He took a breath, let it out slowly. She wrote that whoever held these words was worth knowing, that she was sure of that. Claire's eyes were full. Ethan, she said, I don't want you to feel. I don't feel anything I'm not choosing to feel, he said. That's not how I work. I need you to know that. I don't do things because of pressure or because a situation tells me to. Rachel knew that. She didn't write those letters as instructions. She wrote them as... He looked down. As permission, he said. She was giving me permission. The word landed. Claire sat with it. Outside, the wind moved. A branch shifted somewhere above the house. The furnace kicked on quietly with the particular deep hum of an old house settling into the cold. "I'm not ready," Ethan said. "For whatever this is. I want to be honest with you about that. I don't know what any of this means yet. I have a daughter in the next room and letters from my dead wife in my hands, and I've known you for 5 weeks. I'm not ready." "I know," Claire said, "but I'm not afraid of it anymore," he said. "That's what's different. I've been afraid of this for 4 years. Not you specifically, the idea of this. And I'm reading Rachel's words, and I'm sitting across from you, and I'm—" He shook his head. "I'm not afraid right now." Claire held that. "I'm not ready either," she said. "Just so we're clear, I have my own boxes to unpack, literally and otherwise. I'm 7 months into losing my brother, and I'm still figuring out who I am without him in my weekly landscape. I'm not standing on your side of this saying I've figured anything out." "I know," he said. "I just don't want to lose what this is," she said. "Whatever this is, these weeks, these mornings, I don't want to—" She stopped. "I'm scared if it turns into something I'll ruin it." "And I'm scared if it doesn't turn into something I'll have wasted the only thing Rachel planned this hard for," he said. They looked at each other. "So," Claire said. "So," he said. "A beat. We're both afraid of different things," she said. "Yeah. And neither of us is ready." "Yeah." She almost smiled. "Excellent. Very solid foundation." He almost smiled back. "We're in agreement then. That we're both terrified and unprepared. That we keep going anyway," he said. "That whatever this is, we don't stop it from being something because we're scared." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. The simplest word. The hardest word. "Okay," he said. He set the letters down. Both of them. He sat back in the chair and let out a breath that had been building for what felt like a very long time. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "What did you and Emily talk about that day on the porch when I was fixing the chair?" Claire looked at him. The question seemed to surprise her. "She asked me what my favorite color was," Claire said. "And then she told me hers was the particular blue of her bedroom wall, and she said her mom picked it out." Ethan was very still. "She said," Claire continued softly, "my dad's never going to change it. So when I look at that color, I know something she chose is still here." A pause. "And then she asked if I wanted to know a secret." "What did she say?" Ethan asked. His voice was very quiet. "She said, sometimes I think my mom sends people to look after us, because she was really organized and she wouldn't just leave us by ourselves." The room went completely still. Ethan put his hands over his face for a moment. Just a moment. Then he lowered them. "She's 8, he said. "She's extraordinary," Claire said. "You know that." "Yeah," he said. "I know that." He stood up slowly. He picked up both letters and held them and looked at them, and then he crossed to the wooden box on the shelf where he'd set it, and he placed both letters inside it together for the first time. 2 envelopes, both addressed to him, same handwriting. He closed the box. He turned around. Claire was watching him. She had that expression again, the one from the fence afternoon, the one he hadn't been able to fully read. He read it now. It was not complicated. It was the face of a person who is exactly where they are supposed to be, and knows it, and is slightly awed by the fact. "I should let you get some sleep," she said. "Yeah," he agreed. She stood. She picked up her jacket, which she'd draped over the couch arm, the way she always did. He'd noticed, always the same arm, always draped, not folded. She was already becoming a set of specific patterns to him, and he thought Rachel would have something to say about that, about what it meant when you started cataloging a person's habits. At the door she stopped. "Ethan?" "Yeah." "For what it's worth," she said. "I think she'd be glad you're not afraid anymore." He held that. "Yeah," he said. "I think so too." She walked out into the December night. He watched her all the way to her door, the same thing he always did. He realized the same thing every time, and then he closed his door and stood in the hallway. He went down to Emily's room. He stood in the doorway and looked at his daughter, asleep with the rabbit and the blue wall behind her. The particular blue Rachel had chosen on a Saturday 13 years ago in a paint store on Pine Street, while Ethan held the color swatches and said they all look blue to me. Rach and she'd said, "This one is different. Trust me." And she'd been right. She'd been so exactly right. It was different. It was the best blue he'd ever seen. He stood there for a long time. Then he said very quietly, the way he had before to nothing and everything, "Thank you." He wasn't entirely sure who he was thanking. He was fairly sure it didn't matter. What mattered was that two letters were together in a wooden box for the first time. What mattered was that his daughter had told a near stranger that her mother sent people to look after them because she was organized and wouldn't leave them alone. What mattered was that a woman 3 houses down had knocked on his door in the rain because she couldn't breathe in her own apartment, and he'd let her in, and neither of them had been the same since. He went to bed. For the first time in 4 November 14ths, he slept through the night. But in the morning, something was about to go wrong. Something neither of them had prepared for. Something that would test everything the last 5 weeks had built between them and nearly destroy it. He slept through the night, and that should have felt like a gift. Instead, he woke at 6:15 with a specific kind of unease that he recognized from his years in the fire service. The feeling that comes after a long quiet on a shift when nothing has happened for too many hours, and your body starts sending signals that it doesn't trust the stillness. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to the house, to Emily, still asleep down the hall, to the ordinary sounds of a December morning in Seattle, and he tried to locate what was wrong. Nothing was wrong. That was the problem. He'd read Rachel's letters last night. Both of them. He'd sat across from Claire and said things out loud he hadn't said to anyone in 4 years, and she'd said things back, and the whole evening had been real. In a way that made the last 5 weeks feel like they'd been building toward something. He'd gone to bed and slept 8 uninterrupted hours for the first time since he could clearly remember, and now he was awake at 6:15 with the particular dread of a man who has allowed himself to want something. He got up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window. 3 houses down, Claire's light was on. He thought about Rachel's words, the cage, the window, the difference between loyalty and loneliness. He thought about his daughter telling a near stranger that her mother sent people to look after them because she was organized and wouldn't leave them alone. He thought about what he'd said last night. "I'm not afraid anymore." And he waited for that to still be true in the morning light. It was. Mostly. Underneath it, though, something else was moving. Something he couldn't quite see yet, the way you can't see the thing that's going to trip you in the dark. You only know it's there because the air has changed. He was on shift at 8. He drove in, did his work, came home at 5:15. There was a car in front of Claire's apartment he didn't recognize. He noticed it the way you notice things you're not expecting in a landscape that has become familiar. A silver sedan, rental plates. He registered it and went inside and made dinner and told himself it was none of his business because it wasn't. Claire had a life. People came to visit. She was allowed to have a silver sedan with rental plates outside her apartment, and it had nothing to do with him. Emily noticed him looking out the window twice during dinner. "Whose car is that?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. "You keep looking at it. Eat your chicken, Emily." She ate her chicken. But she looked at him with Rachel's eyes in a way that meant she was filing this information for future reference. The car was gone in the morning. He told himself he hadn't noticed that either. Claire texted at 9. "Sorry I missed coffee this morning. Had a visitor." He wrote back, "No worries. Everything okay?" 3 dots. Then they disappeared. Then they came back. Then, "Yeah, we can talk later if that's okay." He stared at the message. Of course he wrote. But the unease from that morning, the feeling of something moving in the dark, intensified slightly. He'd been in enough situations to know that "we can talk later," said after an unexpected visitor and missed coffee routines, was not a neutral sentence. It was a sentence with weight in it. He'd learned from Rachel, from 4 years of marriage and 1 terrible year of illness, that the things people needed to say later were rarely the easy things. Later came at 7 that evening. Emily was at his sister Janet's house for the night, a standing Friday arrangement that Janet had instituted 6 months after Rachel died, and maintained with the consistency of someone who understood that Ethan needed occasional evenings to simply exist without being anyone's father. Claire knocked at 7:02. He noticed the precision of it, that she'd waited until the time he'd said Emily would be gone. She came in, and he knew immediately. Not what was wrong, just that something was. She'd been crying. Not recently she'd done something about it, washed her face, or given herself time to stabilize, but her eyes had the slightly swollen quality that doesn't fully resolve in a few hours. And her jaw had the tight set of someone who has been holding something in all day and is now at the point where holding it is costing more than they have. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He brought her water, not tea this time, because she looked like someone who needed something simple, and he sat across from her and waited. "My mother called yesterday," she said. He waited. "My mother and I have a complicated relationship," she said. That's a whole separate conversation. But the short version is that she and Daniel were close, in a way she and I were not, and since he died, she's been... She stopped. Started again. She's been dealing with her grief by deciding that Daniel's death is my fault. The sentence landed in the room with a particular weight. Not in a way she'd say directly, Claire said quickly. My mother doesn't do direct. She does the thing where she implies things in ways that leave no fingerprints. She comes to visit, and she looks at my apartment, and she says things like, "Daniel always said you work too much," and "I wonder sometimes if he felt like he couldn't really talk to you," and... She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. She flew in from Portland. She was here for 12 hours. She left this morning. Ethan was very still. "She said that?" he asked. His voice was careful. "She said it the way she says things," Claire said, with enough plausible deniability that you can't push back directly without looking like you're being paranoid. She looked at her hands. Which is the thing about that kind of relationship dynamic. It's designed to make you question your own perception. And I know that. Clinically, I understand exactly what's happening. And it still works. It still gets in. She pressed her lips together hard. She said Daniel told her he felt like he couldn't burden me. Because I was so her word capable. That's not on you, Ethan said immediately. I know that. Claire. I know it, Ethan. In my prefrontal cortex, in the part of my brain that has 8 years of clinical training and a functioning understanding of family systems dynamics. I know it's not my fault. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word the first time it had all evening. But there is another part. And that part has been listening to my mother repackage this in different ways for 7 months, and that part is very tired. He leaned forward. What does that part say? He asked. She looked at him like the question surprised her. That I should have known, she said. That's always what it says. I am a child psychologist. I specialize in emotional awareness. I am supposed to be the person who sees what other people miss. And I missed it. A breath. My brother was struggling, and I missed it. You told me he didn't tell you everything. He didn't. Then you couldn't have seen what he didn't show you. I know that too. Claire. He leaned forward further. I'm not going to tell you the things you already know. You know all the clinical language. You know the frameworks. You've told me that yourself. He paused. So I'm going to ask you something you might not know. She looked at him warily. What would you say to a client? He asked. Sitting exactly where you're sitting right now. Who had just spent 12 hours with a parent who was doing what your mother does. What would you actually say to them? A long silence. I'd say, she started slowly, that grief needs a place to go, and sometimes it goes to the closest available target, and that a parent who lost a child may look for reasons because reasons feel more survivable than randomness. She paused. And I'd say that absorbing someone else's misdirected grief as your own guilt is one of the most common and most damaging things people do after a loss, and that the client's job right now is not to fix the parent's grief. It's to protect their own. And if that client said, "I know all that, but it still works," I'd say that knowing and feeling are different systems, she said quietly. And that the knowing doesn't automatically override the feeling, and that's not a failure, that's just how human beings are built. "Okay," he said. She looked at him. "So apply it," he said simply. She made a sound that was close to a laugh and not quite there. "You make it sound easy." "I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying you already have everything you need to get through this. It's just you have to do the thing where you treat yourself with the same patience I'd extend to anyone else," she said. "I know. I say that to people twice a week." "Yeah, and how's it working on yourself?" This time it was closer to a laugh, an actual one almost. "Terrible," she said. "It's working terribly." "There you go," he said. "You're just like everybody else." She looked at him, and something in her face softened. Not collapsed. She wasn't someone who collapsed, but softened. The held-together quality eased by several degrees. "My mother asked about you," she said. He hadn't expected that. "About me specifically. I mentioned I told her I'd made a friend in the neighborhood. I didn't say more than that, but she—" Claire paused. She saw the muffin wrapper in the recycling. She has the observational skills of a detective and the boundaries of— She stopped. She asked if I was seeing someone. "What did you say?" "I said no." A beat. "I said no," she said again quietly, and this time the word had a different texture, like she was hearing it differently than she had when she said it to her mother. "Okay," he said. "It's accurate," she said quickly. We haven't—" "I know," he said. "I just want to be clear that I wasn't—" "Claire," he said, quietly. "I know." She stopped. He sat back. "What did she say after that?" he asked. "She said, just be careful. You've always had a hard time knowing when you're using people to fill space." Claire said the words flatly, the particular flatness of something repeated verbatim. And then she changed the subject. The room was quiet for a long moment. "That's a terrible thing to say," Ethan said. "Yes." "Is it true?" She looked at him sharply. "Not about you," she said. "Whatever else I'm uncertain about, that's not—" She stopped. "Is that what you think, that you're filling space?" "I don't," he said. "I'm asking if you do, because you've been sitting here for 20 minutes and I can see that sentence working on you. I can see you turning it over." She was quiet. "A little," she admitted. "A small part. Not because I believe it, but because she planted it and she knows how to plant things." She looked at him directly. "But when I actually think about it, when I look at what these weeks have been, that's not what this is. I know the difference between using someone and choosing someone." "Okay," he said. "You're not filling space," she said. You're the first person in 7 months that I've talked to about Daniel without feeling like I was performing grief for them. The first person who didn't look at me like I needed to be managed." She paused. "You just let me be whatever I am. That's not filling space. That's—" She searched. "That's something I haven't had in a long time." He absorbed that. "My captain used to say," he started, "that the people who help you the most are usually the ones who don't try to help you. They just exist alongside you and let the help happen naturally." "Your captain sounds like someone I'd want to meet," she said. "He's been retired 6 years, Ethan said. "Lives in Bend, still calls me on my birthday." A pause. "He called me in the hospital when Rachel was sick. He didn't say anything about it. He called and talked about a fishing trip he'd taken in August, for 40 minutes, fly fishing in the Deschutes. He described every detail, and at the end he said, 'How are you holding up, Walker?' And that was it, just once. And then he talked about fishing for another 10 minutes. Ethan paused. "It was exactly what I needed. I didn't know that until he did it." Claire looked at him. "That's what you did?" she said. "The night I knocked, you let me in and you made tea, and you didn't try to process me." "You didn't need processing," he said. "You needed somewhere to be." "Yeah," she said. They sat for a while. Outside it had started raining again, the particular Seattle rain that was more of an agreement between the sky and the city than an actual weather event. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan asked. "Yeah. After you left last night, after the letters, I went to check on Emily, and she was asleep, and I stood in her doorway, and I talked to Rachel." He said it simply, no qualification, no apologetic framing. "I do that sometimes. I know she's not answering. I know it's a one-sided conversation. But I've been doing it since she died, and it helps, so I do it." "What did you say to her?" Claire asked. "I said thank you," he said. I didn't entirely know for what, or maybe I did know, and I didn't have the words yet. He looked at Claire. I think I was thanking her for planning, for knowing me well enough to know what I'd need, even when I didn't. "She did know you," Claire said softly. "She did," he said. "And the thing is, part of what made it hard these 4 years wasn't just the grief. It was that I lost the person who knew me best. It's not just about love. It's about being known, having someone in your life who has enough data on you to see around your corners. Daniel knew me that way," Claire said. "I know. The Sunday calls they weren't just phone calls," she said. "They were a check-in. He knew my patterns well enough that if I said I was fine in a certain way, he'd push back. He'd say, 'That's your competent voice, C. Give me the other one.'" She smiled briefly, a real one, the full version. He was the only person I could give the other voice to. "Who do you give it to now?" Ethan asked. She looked at him. "I'm working on that," she said, the same words she'd used before. But the meaning had shifted slightly. He heard the shift. He didn't say anything about it, but he heard it. It was 9:30 when she stood to go. He walked her to the door the way he always did, and she put on her jacket the way she always did, and at the door she stopped the way she always did. But this time something was different. She turned around and she said, "Ethan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just hear it and not do anything with it right away." He looked at her. "Okay," he said. "I'm scared," she said. "Of this. Of what it's becoming. Not because I don't want it. I do want it. I think I want it more than I've wanted most things in a long time. But I have a pattern." She met his eyes. "I get close to people, and then I find a reason to leave. I have done it my whole adult life. I have explained it to myself in 12 different ways, and I understand the origins of it, and I have still done it every time." He was very still. "I'm telling you because—" She stopped. "Because I think you deserve to know the thing that might go wrong, before it goes wrong, because that's the honest version of this." He thought about what she'd said. He thought about it carefully, the way he thought about things in emergencies, not fast, not reactive, just clear. "Can I tell you something back?" he asked. "Yeah. I've been alone for 4 years," he said. "Not accidentally, not because the right person didn't show up, because I kept the door closed, because I decided at some point that keeping Emily safe and doing my job and being a good neighbor was enough to constitute a life." He looked at her. "I was wrong about that. I've known I was wrong about that for probably 2 years, and I kept doing it anyway." "Okay," she said carefully. "So we both have patterns," he said. "You leave. I close doors, and we're both standing here telling each other about it." He paused. "That's either a really good sign or a spectacular warning." "Which do you think?" "I think," he said, "that people who tell you their damage up front are the ones worth taking seriously." Something moved through her face. "That's either very wise or very naive," she said. "Probably some of both," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she did something unexpected. She reached out and put her hand on his arm, just briefly, just for a second, her hand on the sleeve of his flannel shirt, and then she let go. "Good night, Ethan," she said. "Good night, Claire," he said. She walked down to her apartment, and he watched her go, and he thought, this is how things build. Not in grand gestures, not in dramatic declarations, in a hand on an arm for 3 seconds, in coffee on a porch in the dark, in someone saying, here is the thing that might break this before it breaks. He went inside. He was not prepared for what the next week brought. It started on Tuesday. He'd picked Emily up from school normal afternoon. They'd had dinner. Emily was doing homework at the kitchen table when his phone rang. Number he didn't recognize. He picked up. "Is this Ethan Walker?" "Yeah." "My name is Sandra Morris. I'm Claire Morgan's mother." He went very still. He walked to the hallway out of Emily's earshot. "Mrs. Morris," he said carefully. "I know Claire has mentioned me," Sandra said. Her voice was measured precise, the voice of someone who had practiced what she was going to say. "I want to be clear that I'm not calling to cause trouble. I'm calling because I love my daughter, and I'm worried about her." "Okay," he said. "She's vulnerable right now," Sandra said. "She's lost her brother, and she's moved to a new city, and she's isolated. I understand that having a neighbor she's connected with feels significant to her. But I would ask you as someone who knows her history." "You're asking me to back off," he said. A pause. She hadn't expected directness. He could tell by the half-second recalibration in her voice. "I'm asking you to be careful with her," she said. "Claire has a pattern of forming intense connections quickly when she's in pain. She fills the space with people who feel safe, and then when the pain shifts, the connection—" "Mrs. Morris," he said, "doesn't hold up, and everyone ends up hurt, and—" "Mrs. Morris," he said again more firmly. She stopped. "Claire told me about her patterns herself," he said. "She told me directly. She didn't wait for someone else to tell me." He kept his voice steady. "I appreciate that you're worried about your daughter. I think she'd be glad to know that, actually. But this conversation isn't mine to have. Whatever concerns you have about Claire's well-being, those belong between you and her." A long pause. "You don't know what she's capable of when she pulls back," Sandra said. Her voice had shifted, less measured now. "You don't know what it looks like. I do. I've watched her cut people out when things get hard. People who loved her. People who thought—" "I believe you," he said. "And it's still not my conversation to have." He heard her breathing. "She's my daughter," Sandra said. And for the first time, under the precision, under the careful damage, he heard something that was just a mother. Just a woman who had lost one child and was terrified of losing another in a different way. "I know," he said. His voice was gentler. "I know she is." "I'm not trying to." "I know," he said. "I know you're not." Silence. "If she's building something," Ethan said carefully, "with anyone, me or someone else, the best thing you can do is let her try. Because the alternative is, she doesn't try." He paused. "And I don't think either of you wants that." Sandra Morris was quiet for a long time. "You seem like a decent man," she said finally. "I try to be." Another pause. "She doesn't know I called you," Sandra said. "I know." "I'd ask you not to tell her." He thought about that. "I can't promise that," he said. "If she asks me directly, I'll tell her the truth. But I won't bring it up unprompted." It wasn't the answer she wanted, but she took it. "Take care of her," Sandra said, and the precision was entirely gone from her voice now. Just the mother. "She acts like she doesn't need it. She does." "I know," he said. She hung up. He stood in the hallway for a moment holding his phone, and then he went back to the kitchen where Emily was doing long division and looking up at him with Rachel's eyes. "Who was that?" she asked. "Work," he said. Emily looked at him for exactly 1 second longer than necessary, which meant she didn't believe him, and then she went back to long division, which meant she'd decided not to pursue it. He made them both hot chocolate and sat at the table and helped her with the math and did not think about the phone call for the rest of the evening. He thought about it at 11 when he was lying in bed. He thought about what Sandra had said. She cuts people out when things get hard. He thought about Claire standing in his doorway and saying, "I have a pattern. I get close to people and then I find a reason to leave." He thought about how those two descriptions of the same person were not the same. The mother's description was a wound. Claire's description was a warning, They looked similar from the outside, but they came from completely different places. One was about damage. One was about self-awareness. He had learned slowly, and sometimes painfully, over 4 years of being the person Emily watched, to understand how adults worked, that the difference between those two things was everything. He slept eventually. Wednesday passed quietly. Thursday morning, he found no coffee on his porch for the first time in 3 weeks. He noticed it registered. It told himself it meant nothing. By Thursday afternoon, he had not heard from Claire in 36 hours, and the thing that was moving in the dark, the thing he'd sensed when he woke on Sunday morning, was moving faster now. He did not reach out. He'd decided that Tuesday night consciously that he was not going to reach out first. Not because he was playing some kind of game, but because whatever Claire was working through with her mother, whatever the 12 hours of that visit had stirred up, she needed space to work it through without him hovering at the edges of it. He knew what hovering looked like. He'd had people hover in those first months after Rachel, and he knew it made things harder, not easier, even when it came from the right place. Friday evening, Emily came back from Janet's. They made dinner, and Emily told him at length about the movie they'd watched, something about dolphins, apparently, because she was deeply in her marine biologist phase, and afterward she sat across from him and said with no preamble, "Why hasn't Claire come by?" Ethan set down his fork. "She's been busy," he said. "She missed coffee twice," Emily said. "How do you know that?" "Because I checked the porch both days on my way to school," Emily said, completely matter of fact. He stared at his daughter. "She's having a hard week," he said. "We're giving her space." "Oh," Emily said. "Then, can we make something for her?" "Emily, not muffins. Something different. Something for a hard week specifically." She was already thinking, her fork suspended in the air, her expression calculating. "Soup. Hard weeks need soup. That's what you made me when I had the flu." He looked at her. "You think we should bring her soup?" he said. "Chicken soup," Emily said. "With the noodles that look like little bow ties. She seems like a bow tie noodle person." He wanted to ask how she kept making these determinations about what kind of person Claire was, but he suspected the answer would be so logical and Emily-specific that it would just make him feel further behind. "Tomorrow," he said, "if she's home." "She'll be home," Emily said confidently. He had no grounds on which to argue with that level of certainty, so he didn't. Saturday morning, he made chicken soup. Emily supervised and offered opinions on the noodle quantity, and he added more noodles than the recipe called for because it was that kind of soup, and they were making it for a specific reason. When it was done, Emily wrapped it carefully. She had opinions about the container too. He used the good one with the locking lid, and she carried it to Claire's door herself because she'd decided this was her mission. Claire answered on the second knock. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from physical things. The other kind, the kind that lives in the eyes and the set of the mouth, and the particular way a person holds their shoulders when they've been holding themselves up for too long. When she saw Emily standing there with a container of soup, something in her face went very soft, very fast. "We made bow tie noodle soup," Emily announced, "because it's a hard week." Claire looked from Emily to Ethan, who was standing slightly back, and then back to Emily. "How did you know it was a hard week?" she asked. "Because you missed coffee," Emily said simply. "And Dad says people need soup when it's hard." Claire crouched down to Emily's eye level, took the soup with both hands. "Thank you, Emily," she said. Her voice was steady, barely. "You're welcome," Emily said. "Dad makes it with Parmesan on top if you want. He can bring some over." "Emily," Ethan said. "It's really good with Parmesan," Emily told Claire seriously. Claire laughed. The full version. Even through whatever the week had been, it came out whole. "Come in," she said. "Both of you." They came in. Her apartment was slightly different from how he'd seen it before. The boxes that had been against the wall were gone, finally unpacked. The shelves filled with books and a few plants and a framed photo he hadn't seen before. He looked at it briefly. A woman and a younger man outdoors. both of them laughing, the same photograph she'd held in the rain on his doorstep. She'd framed it. She'd put it on the shelf with the books and the plants, and it was just there now, part of the room. She'd stopped keeping him in a box. He looked at it and didn't say anything, and she caught him looking and didn't say anything either, but he saw something in her face that meant she knew what he'd noticed. Emily sat at the kitchen table, and Claire heated the soup, and Ethan sat across from Emily, and they all ate together, which was not what he'd planned, and was somehow exactly right. Emily talked about the dolphin documentary. Claire asked questions. The soup was good, and the apartment felt different, not like a collection of boxes, not like someone's temporary arrangement, but like a place where a person lived. When Emily asked to use the bathroom and disappeared down the hall, Claire and Ethan were alone in the kitchen for the first time all week. She looked at him. "I went quiet on you," she said. "You needed space," he said. "I know, but I should have." She shook her head. "I went into the pattern." She left, and I started dismantling things in my head. All the reasons this was a mistake. All the reasons it was too fast and too convenient, and I was too broken, and you had enough to deal with. She looked at him directly. I had myself completely convinced by Wednesday morning. "What changed?" he asked. "Emily brought soup," she said. He almost smiled. "I mean it," she said. "It was genuinely that simple. I was sitting here on Saturday morning telling myself that the kindest thing I could do for you was to pull back slowly and save everyone the trouble. And then someone knocked on my door, and your daughter was standing there with soup and looking at me like I was a problem she'd already solved." A pause. "She looks at people that way, you know. Like the answer is obvious and she's just waiting for you to catch up." "Yeah," he said. "She gets that from Rachel." "I know," Claire said softly. Emily came back, and the moment folded itself back into normalcy, and they finished the soup, and Emily declared the bow tie noodles a success. And Claire agreed, and the afternoon moved forward, the way good afternoons do, without agenda, just time that happens to be good. But something had been said. He'd heard it. She'd been dismantling things. She'd convinced herself by Wednesday, and then the soup had shown up and something had shifted. He didn't know what to do with that exactly, but he held it, and he thought it was something important, the fact that Emily showing up with soup had done what nothing else could. Because that was, he thought, maybe the whole truth of it. Not that Claire needed him, not that he needed her, but that they had somehow, in 5 weeks of coffee and fence repairs and letters and hard evenings, built something that had its own weight now, its own presence, something that pushed back when she tried to dismantle it. That wasn't nothing. That was actually quite a lot. Emily fell asleep on Claire's couch at 5 o'clock, which was something she would deny vehemently when she woke up curled into the corner with her arm over her face, because she'd insisted she wasn't tired for approximately 45 minutes before the insistence stopped working. Ethan sat with Claire at the kitchen table, and they talked quietly. The way you talk when a child is sleeping in the next room, and outside, the rain started again. Seattle rain, persistent and gray, and neither of them mentioned it. "My mother called you," Claire said. He went still. She was looking at her coffee cup. "She told me this morning," Claire said. "She called me and told me she'd called you, which I believe was designed to—" She stopped. "I don't know what it was designed to do. Destabilize things, maybe? Or maybe she actually felt guilty about it. With my mother, it's hard to tell." "I wasn't going to bring it up," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm bringing it up." She looked at him. "What did she say?" "She told me you had a pattern of forming intense connections when you're in pain, and then leaving," he said. Directly. Claire's jaw tightened. "Yeah," she said. "That sounds right." "She also sounded like a woman who was terrified of losing you," he said. That also came through. Claire looked at him. "She doesn't know how to say that without it coming out as a preemptive strike," he said. "Yeah." A pause. "I'm sorry she called you." "Don't be," he said. "She said something that I needed to hear." "She said I'd cut you out," Claire said. "She said you were capable of it," he said. "Those aren't the same thing." He looked at her. I already knew you were capable of it. You told me yourself. And that doesn't— No, he said. It doesn't. He held her gaze. You came to my door in the rain, and you didn't pretend you had a better reason than the actual reason. Rachel gave you a letter, and you didn't keep it when you found out whose door it belonged to. You told me your damage before it became my problem. He paused. Capable of something and choosing something are different things. You've been choosing differently than your pattern every single time I've watched you. She stared at him. Her mouth opened slightly. She closed it. I don't know what to do with you, she said finally. You don't have to do anything with me, he said. You just have to stop trying to talk yourself out of this. She looked at him for a long time. Something moving through her expression that he didn't try to catalog, just let move. Okay, she said. It was the same word as before, the one that had landed like the hardest word in the language. Okay, he said back. Emily shifted on the couch. They both looked toward her reflexively. The particular parental alertness that doesn't actually require being a parent, just requires someone you care about to be nearby. She settled and didn't wake. They sat in the quiet kitchen, with the rain on the window, and the soup bowls stacked by the sink, and Daniel's photo on the shelf, and Rachel's arrangement working its way forward through time, the way arrangements do quietly without drama, one day after another. Ethan looked at the photograph on the shelf. Daniel and Claire both laughing. He would have liked this, he said. Claire followed his gaze. The soup, she said. All of it, he said. She looked at the photograph for a moment. Yeah, she said softly. He would have. He would have texted me 47 things about it. Claire. The firefighter. The soup. The daughter with the bow tie noodles. This is not subtle. This is a sign. Claire. She smiled. A real one. All caps. Ethan smiled back. Rachel would have been insufferably pleased with herself, he said. She earned it, Claire said. She really did, he said. Emily woke up at 6:15, claiming she had not been asleep, and Ethan let it go, and they said goodnight on Claire's porch this time, which felt like something new without being something he could name precisely. He walked home with Emily's hand in his, and Emily said without looking up, She's going to be okay. Yeah, he said. I think so. And you are too, Emily said. Matter of fact, already moving on to something else in her head, something about whether they needed more bow tie noodles for next time. He looked down at the top of her head. He thought about arrangements, about windows and cages, about the difference between loyalty and loneliness, about a woman in a blue sweater in a hospital lounge who'd closed the tab on one last laugh before the harder thing started, and then done the most loving thing he'd ever known anyone to do, which was to look down the road ahead of him and leave him something to find when he got there. He thought about how you build a future without forgetting a past, and for the first time in 4 years, he thought he might be starting to understand how. 3 months after the soup, Ethan stopped waiting to feel ready. He'd been thinking about it since January. The thing he wanted to say to Claire. The specific thing, not the everyday version that came through in coffee and repaired furniture and long evenings at the kitchen table, but the real version, the one that required him to stand somewhere vulnerable and speak clearly. He kept telling himself he'd know when the time was right. He kept waiting for some signal that the right moment had arrived. Then Dennis pulled him aside after a Tuesday shift and said, You've been doing that thing where you're about to do something important and you keep not doing it. Ethan looked at him. What thing? He said. The thinking so hard your face changes thing, Dennis said. You've been doing it for 3 weeks. Whatever it is, just do it, Walker. You're making me tired. He drove home from the station thinking about that. He thought about Rachel, who had never in 13 years of marriage waited to say something important. Who would have looked at him right now and said, Ethan, you spent 4 years being afraid, and the last 3 months being almost not afraid. So when exactly are you planning to cross the line? He thought about his daughter, who had told him on a Saturday afternoon, while carrying soup to a neighbor's door, that he was going to be okay, in the same tone she used when discussing established scientific fact, because for Emily, it was. He thought about a woman who had knocked on his door at 11 o'clock in the rain and asked for the hardest thing there is to ask for, which is not help, but simply presence, and who had spent the months since then showing him without ever meaning to demonstrate it, which was how the best demonstrations worked that she was exactly who she appeared to be. He stopped waiting to feel ready. He went home, changed out of his work clothes, and looked at the wooden box on the shelf. He opened it. He looked at both letters side by side in their cream envelopes. He didn't take them out. He just looked at them, and he said quietly, in the way he'd gotten comfortable saying things to the person who wasn't there to hear them, "I'm going to do something. I think you'd say it was about time." Then he closed the box. He called Janet. "Can Emily stay tonight?" he asked. Janet was quiet for exactly 1 second. "How long have you been working up to this?" "Janet." "How long, Ethan?" "About 3 months," he said. "I'll pick her up at 5, Janet said. "And for the record, it's about time." He hung up. He sat at the kitchen table and put his hands flat on the surface and breathed. He thought about what he wanted to say and how he wanted to say it, and he had a whole version built by 4:30, careful and considered and well organized. He abandoned the whole version by 5:15. Because he'd learned slowly and over 4 years of being a person who'd had to start over in the most essential way possible, that the prepared version of things was never the right version. The right version was the true version, and the true version was never something you planned. It was something you showed up for. He went to Claire's door at 7. He had the small wooden box under his arm. He knocked 3 times. Slow. He did it without thinking about it, and then stood there, and the recognition hit him a beat after the knocking stopped. 3 slow knocks. In the rain the night this started, she had knocked exactly that way, and he had counted them from inside the kitchen, and now here he was on the other side of a door doing the same thing. He heard her footsteps. She opened the door. She was in a sweater the color of something warm, not quite yellow, her hair loose, and she had clearly been reading. She was holding a book, finger marking the page, and she looked at him with the expression that had become familiar to him over these months, the one that said she was genuinely glad to see him and was not going to make it complicated. She looked at the box under his arm. Something in her face changed. Not alarm. The opposite of alarm. The face of a person who is watching something they've been half expecting approach from a distance and is now uncertain whether to brace or to let go. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He came inside. She didn't move to the couch, just stayed near the door, and he turned to face her, and she was still holding the book with her finger in the page, which was very Claire, the part of her that kept doing what she was doing, even when something larger was happening. "You can put the book down," he said. She looked at it like she'd forgotten it was there. She set it on the table by the door. "Okay," she said. "I've been trying to figure out the right way to do this for 3 months, he said. "I had a whole version of it. It was very organized. I threw it out about an hour ago." She pressed her lips together. Not to suppress a smile exactly, something fuller than that. "Okay," she said again. "I want to tell you some things," he said. "And I want you to let me get through them before you respond, because if you say something in the middle, I'm going to lose the thread." "Okay," she said. A 3rd time. And each time she'd said it, it had a different weight, and he thought that was one of the things he'd come to understand about her, that her vocabulary of okay was more extensive than most people's vocabulary of paragraphs. "3 months ago you brought me letters from my dead wife," he said. "And before that, you knocked on my door in the rain, because you couldn't breathe in your apartment, and you didn't make up a better reason. And before that, Rachel sat in a hospital lounge and gave a stranger something important to hold, because she trusted her to know what to do with it." He paused. "I've been thinking about that chain of things. How each one led to the next. How nothing about it was supposed to happen the way it happened. You weren't supposed to move 3 houses down from me. I wasn't supposed to have my light on at 11 on a night when you were walking past. She wasn't supposed to be in that lounge on that particular Saturday. Claire was very still. And I used to think, he said, that the word for how things happen that aren't supposed to is coincidence. But I don't think that's the right word anymore. I think the right word is accumulation. Things that accumulate toward something. Small things. Coffee on a porch. A fence with 2 missing boards. A rocking chair with a cracked spindle. A conversation that goes until 2 in the morning because neither person wants to be the first one to say it's late. She exhaled slowly. Rachel wrote in her letter that the person who comes into your life after her isn't a replacement, he said. She said they're proof that she taught me how to love well. He looked at Claire. I've been carrying that sentence for 3 months. And I've been watching you with Emily. And I've been watching you in the mornings before work, when you think nobody's watching. And I've been watching you put Daniel's photo on the shelf where you can see it from the couch. And I think Rachel was right. I think she was exactly right. Claire's jaw was tight. They held together. He knew it by now, knew what it meant. Not control for its own sake, but the effort of someone who feels things very deeply and has learned to manage that and is currently right at the edge of the management. I'm not asking you to be anything you're not, he said. I'm not asking you to replace anything or fill any space or be anyone's answer to anything. I'm asking you to... He stopped, found the precise true thing. I'm asking you to keep going, whatever this is, however long it takes to figure out what this is. I don't need it to be named. I just need it to keep going. He held out the wooden box. She looked at it. Open it, he said. She took it from him slowly. Her hands were careful with it, the same careful she'd used when she handed him Rachel's letter, the quality he'd noticed. Then she held things like they mattered. She opened the box. Inside, on top of the 2 letters in their cream envelopes, was a 3rd envelope. New. His handwriting on the front. Her name. Just Claire. She looked at him. You can read it later, he said. Or not at all. But I wanted to say it the way she did, in writing, because she knew that some things need a page to live on. What does it say? She asked. Her voice was careful and unsteady in equal measure. It says, he started, that I spent 4 years learning how to miss someone, and now I want to learn something else. It says that my daughter makes muffins for sad neighbors and brings soup on hard weeks and tells anyone who will listen that the people we love are still with us, just different. And I've been watching her do that and thinking the bravest person I know is 8 years old, and I should probably catch up. He paused. It says that Rachel left me 2 letters and a stranger's address, and a whole future she'd already thought through on my behalf, and I've been standing in the doorway of that future for 3 months, and I think it's time to walk in. Claire had stopped trying to keep it contained. She wasn't crying the way people cry in movies. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that asked for anything. She was just doing the thing that happens when you've been holding something carefully for a very long time, and someone takes the weight from you, and your body simply responds to the absence of the weight. Ethan, she said. I know, he said. I have things I'm still working through. The pattern, my mother, Daniel. I know, he said. So do I. That's not the part I'm asking about. I'm asking about the other part. The part that keeps going even when we're both still working through things. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. The gesture was so unguarded, so specifically her the Claire that existed before she put the professional composure on in the morning. You said 3 months ago that you weren't afraid anymore, she said. Is that still true? He thought about it honestly the way he always did when she asked him something real. Mostly, he said. The part that still knows how to be afraid is the part that knows what it costs to lose someone. That part doesn't go away. But it's not running the show anymore. She looked at him for a long moment. What changed? She asked. From the night I knocked to now, what actually changed? He considered it. I stopped asking permission, he said. She tilted her head slightly. I'd been asking permission for 4 years, he said. Asking whether it was okay to be okay. Asking whether Rachel would mind if I laughed at something. asking whether Emily was allowed to have someone new in her world without it meaning something was being taken from her. He paused. And then I read Rachel's letters, and I understood that she'd already given me the permission. She gave it to me 4 years ago. I just wasn't ready to use it. And now? Now I'm ready, he said. She held the box against her chest, his letter and Rachel's letters together inside it. 3 envelopes in the same space, and she looked at him with an expression that he did not try to name, because some things don't need names, they just need to be received. I want to tell you something, she said. Tell me. The night I knocked on your door, she said. I stood outside for 10 minutes, telling myself it was a crazy idea, and the reason I finally knocked wasn't because I talked myself into it. It was because I got tired of talking myself out of everything. She held his gaze. I have spent my whole adult life talking myself out of things that scared me. Relationships, closeness, letting people know me past the professional version. A pause. I got tired. That's the real reason I knocked. Not courage, just exhaustion with my own defenses. That might be the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me, he said. Daniel would tell you that's my version of a love letter, she said. And the smile that came with it was the full one, the one that changed her face. He thought about all caps texts and 37 million ants and Sunday morning calls at 9. He thought about a brother who knew his sister well enough to know her competent voice from her other voice, who would have had absolute opinions about this moment and would have expressed them entirely in capital letters. He'd be texting you right now, Ethan said. She made a sound that was a laugh and something more than a laugh. He'd have texted me approximately 40 minutes ago, she said. When you showed up at my door with Rachel's box, he would have seen it coming before I did. Smart kid, Ethan said. The smartest, she said softly. They stood there, and the room held them both, and outside Seattle did what Seattle does in February, which is rain gently and consistently without apology. And neither of them moved to do anything about the distance between them, because some moments don't need to be hurried. Some moments are exactly the right size, exactly the right weight, and the only thing to do with them is be present inside them. Then Claire said, Emily knows, doesn't she? It was not a question. Emily has known since approximately the 2nd week, he said. She told me last week, Claire said. She said very casually, completely out of nowhere. My dad smiles more when you're around. And then she went back to her homework. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. She said that to me too, he said. Months ago, almost word for word. She's been stage managing this whole time, Claire said. She really has, he said. She's 8. She's Rachel's daughter, he said. Rachel could organize a whole future before anyone else had figured out the present. Apparently it's genetic. Claire laughed again, and this time it settled into something quieter, something warmer. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay, he said back. I mean it this time without the fear behind it, she said. Or not without the fear. With the fear, and anyway. That's the only way, he said. She nodded. She held out the wooden box, and he took it from her, and she kept his letter. She set it on the table by the door, separate from the box. Her letter. His handwriting. Her name. She would read it later in the specific way she read things that mattered carefully, probably more than once, turning the words over the way she turned everything over. He knew that about her now. He knew the bow-tie noodle soup person, and the all-capsant facts appreciator, and the one who left coffee in the dark at 5:30 in the morning, and the one who stood in the rain for 10 minutes before she knocked, and the one who crouched down to look his daughter in the eyes, and received the truth from an 8-year-old without flinching. He knew her. Not completely. Nobody knew anyone completely. That was the ongoing work of choosing someone, the daily discovery, but enough. Enough to have written her a letter. Enough to mean it. He went home. He stood in his kitchen under the steady, clear light of the bulb that didn't flicker anymore, and he thought about arrangements and about the distance between where he'd started and where he was, and about the particular fact that both felt true at once, that Rachel was gone and that he was here, and that those two things could coexist without one canceling the other. He opened the wooden box one more time. He looked at the 3 envelopes. Rachel's 2. His 1. He thought about windows and cages. He thought about the difference between loyalty and loneliness. He thought about love as something that doesn't replace, just continues in new forms, the way a river continues even when it changes course, carrying the same water forward. He closed the box. He called Janet to tell her he'd pick Emily up in the morning. "How'd it go?" Janet asked. "Good," he said. "That's it, just good?" He thought about the right word. "Yeah," he said. "Good." Janet made a sound like she didn't believe him, which was fine, because he knew she understood what good meant coming from him, the particular weight of it, the fact that he didn't use the word lightly, and never had. "Give Emily my love," he said. "She'll make you tell her everything in the morning," Janet said. "I know," he said. "She'll probably already know all of it." "Probably," Janet agreed. He hung up. He went to the kitchen table and sat down, and the house had its sound again. Not the same sound as before, not Rachel's particular hum, or the specific rhythm of how she moved through rooms. Different. New. But sound. Texture. The quality of a space that had stopped holding its breath. He thought about the night Claire had knocked. The 3 slow knocks in the rain that he'd counted from inside the door he'd opened without checking the window. The woman standing there with a photograph and 5 honest words. He thought about everything that had accumulated from that night forward. The chain of small things, the coffee and the soup and the fence boards and the rocking chair and the letters and the December evening that had changed the shape of everything without announcing itself as a turning point. That was how it always worked, he thought. The turning points never looked like turning points while you were in them. They only became visible in the looking back, the way certain things only resolve into focus once you've moved far enough away to see the whole picture. He had been afraid for 4 years. And then he had answered a door at 11 o'clock at night and let someone in out of the rain, and the fear had not disappeared. It had just become smaller than everything else. Emily came home Sunday morning full of opinions about the dolphin documentary and carrying a drawing she'd made at Janet's 2 adults and a child in front of a house done in Emily's particular style, which meant everyone had very large heads and very small bodies and extremely detailed shoes. She put it on the table in front of him without explanation. He looked at it. 3 figures. The tallest one was him he could tell by the fire hat she'd given him, even though he hadn't worn it in years, but it was his identifying symbol in Emily's drawings and had been since she was 4. The small one was Emily, with the rabbit tucked under her arm. And the 3rd figure, same height as him, was wearing a sweater the color of something warm, not quite yellow. He looked at his daughter. "When did you draw this?" he asked. "Last night," she said, completely matter of fact, getting herself a glass of water, moving around her kitchen in the comfortable way of a child who owns the space. "Before or after I called Aunt Janet?" he asked. She turned to look at him. "Before," she said. He stared at her. She shrugged. The mild, unsurprised shrug of a person to whom the answer was obvious. "Mom always said you were slow," she said, "but you get there." He sat at his kitchen table with his 8-year-old daughter's drawing in front of him, and he thought that Rachel Walker had been, without question, the most effective person he had ever known, and that she had left behind a legacy in this small human being that was going to outlast everything. "Go get your shoes," he said. "We're going to Claire's for breakfast." Emily smiled the smile she would have denied was triumphant. It was completely triumphant. She got her shoes. Spring came, the way spring comes in Seattle, not like a switch, but like a slow argument that winter eventually loses. The rain thinned. The light came back. The garden Ethan had been failing to winterize properly for 4 years came back with a stubbornness that felt personal, which he told Claire about one afternoon in March, while they were both in the backyard, her helping Emily identify different plants by the shape of their leaves, him trying to explain the tomato disaster of the previous July, which she laughed at in installments over the course of the entire afternoon. Tom Kaczynski came over the back fence to say hello and saw the 3 of them in the yard, and went back inside without saying whatever he'd come to say. And that evening, Ethan found a jar of pickles on his porch with a note that said, "Looks like the garden's doing better this year," which was Tom's way of saying he approved, because Tom was not a man who said things directly if an oblique jar of pickles would do. They moved slowly. That was the right word for it. The right pace, slowly. The way anything real moves, not rushed toward conclusions, not performing a relationship, but building one. Claire kept her apartment. Ethan kept his house. Emily kept her blue bedroom wall, and her opinions about everything, and her habit of arriving at conclusions well before the adults around her. But things accumulated, the way things do. Claire's reading chair appeared on his back porch on a Saturday in April, because she'd decided she liked reading outside, and his porch faced the garden, which she'd decided she was interested in. He did not comment on this. The chair simply became part of the porch, part of the landscape, part of the house's sound. He started leaving the porch light on when she walked home from his place in the evenings. She noticed. She didn't say anything about it. She just started coming over later because the light meant there was no reason to hurry. Emily made her a birthday card in May, with a very large head and very small body, and a sweater the color of something warm, and presented it with the gravity of someone delivering a diplomatic document, and Claire had taped it to her refrigerator immediately before she'd even finished looking at it. And Emily had watched her do it with the expression of a person who has correctly predicted the outcome of an important experiment. There was a Saturday in June when the three of them went to the market on Pike, which was a thing Ethan had not done on a Saturday since Rachel was alive, because it had been their Saturday thing, and he hadn't been able to go back. He'd told Claire this briefly one evening in April, not as an invitation, just as a fact about himself, and she'd listened and not said anything about it. Then on a Friday in June, she'd mentioned she'd never been to Pike Place Market, and asked if Emily would want to go, because Emily had been talking about the fish and the flowers for weeks. He'd understood exactly what she was doing. He hadn't called attention to it. He'd just said yes. They went. Emily was fascinated by everything, as Emily always was. Claire bought flowers from a stall near the entrance, yellow ones, and Emily carried them. Ethan walked through the market for the first time in 4 years, and it was different from what he'd feared, not haunted, not empty, just a place with flowers and people, and the particular noise of a Saturday morning. The old feeling was there, the absence of Rachel, but it was not the sharp thing it had been. It was the other kind. The kind you carry and still move with. He told Claire that evening. She listened. She said, "Yeah, just that," which was exactly right. On an evening in late June, they were sitting on his back porch, her chair and his chair, the garden going in the summer light, and Emily was inside finishing dinner because she'd announced she wasn't hungry yet, and then immediately eaten 3 pieces of garlic bread. And Claire was reading, and Ethan was not reading, just sitting. And it was quiet in the way that good things are quiet, full of itself. Claire looked up from her book. "I called my mother," she said. He waited. "We talked for an hour," she said. "Actually talked, not the other version." She looked at him. "I told her about Daniel, the real things, not the managed version, the other voice." "How was it?" he asked. "Hard," she said. "Good." She paused. "Both." He nodded. "She asked about you," Claire said. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you made good soup, and you fixed things, and you had a daughter who was smarter than both of us, and that I—" She stopped. "I told her I was happy, that I was actually happy." She looked at him directly. She cried, which I wasn't expecting, and then she apologized, which I really wasn't expecting. He sat with that. "That took courage," he said. Calling her. "I've been trying to do things that take courage," she said. "I find it helps to have a reference point." "What's your reference point?" She looked at him. "A woman I never met," she said, who sat in a hospital lounge in a blue sweater and finished her laugh before the harder things started, and then made arrangements. He breathed. "Yeah," he said. Emily came out onto the porch at that moment, having decided she was hungry after all, and also that she wanted to see what they were talking about, and she looked at both of them with the assessment of someone checking on a project. "You look happy," she said to Claire. "I am happy," Claire said. Emily nodded. "Good." She looked at her father. "You too." "Me too," Ethan said. Emily considered this for one more second, and then said, "Can we have ice cream?" That was the thing about Emily Walker. She knew when the important things were settled, and she was ready to move on to the next thing, which right now was ice cream. And there was something in that. The natural way she moved forward, the assumption that good things were not fragile, that happiness did not require constant tending to keep it from disappearing, that Ethan had been learning from her for years. She was 8. She had lost her mother at 4. She had watched her father be alone for as long as she could really remember. And she made bow-tie noodle soup for sad neighbors and drawings with 3 figures in the front yard, and birthday cards that went directly onto the refrigerator. And she moved through the world with the calm certainty of someone who had decided very early that love was reliable, even when people weren't permanent. He had been learning how to be brave from his daughter for 4 years. He was still learning. He thought he'd probably keep learning for the rest of his life, and for the first time, that thought did not feel like something to survive. It felt like something to look forward to. They had ice cream on the porch in the summer evening, the 3 of them, the garden going green behind them, the porch light already on, even though it wasn't dark yet, because Ethan had started leaving it on earlier, and he had no intention of stopping. And the house that had once been a monument, and then a place he was maintaining, and then slowly, incrementally, almost invisibly something that had started to feel like what it was always supposed to be. The house had its sound back. Different from before. New, but full. And that was everything. Because the night a lonely woman knocked on a single father's door in the rain and asked for the simplest and most difficult thing there is, not to be rescued, not to be fixed, just not to be alone. She did not change his life by arriving in it. She reminded him that his life was still happening, and Ethan Walker, who had learned how to carry grief and raise a daughter and change a light bulb and fix a fence and read a dead woman's handwriting by the light of a steady kitchen bulb. Ethan Walker finally completely walked through the door that had been standing open for him all along.